Are announcing their paid sick day program. Now, this bill is going to be introduced at Queen's Park today. Labour Minister Monty McNaughton says the province will pay up to 3 sick days per person, but the maximum is $200 a day. The program also has an expiry date in September. It falls far short of what doctors and opposition politicians had called for. Andrea Horvath of the NDP, for example, said the province needs 14 days of guaranteed sick pay. City News Time, 9:01. And now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls today, generally just a lot of cloud. We get into that steadier rain for the evening. 18 the high today. More rain overnight, 9 for the low. And tomorrow, periods of rain, high about 11 with a gusty wind. For today, the high, 18.
And right now in Ottawa, 10 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 9. A GoFundMe page for a Smiths Falls woman and her son is getting very close to its adjusted goal now. Courtney Priest needs to find a wheelchair-accessible home before the end of May. The current housing has been sold, so she has to get out by the end of May. Courtney suffers from a disease called TM. It has left her in a wheelchair for the past 9 years. Now, her support system to help raise her 6-year-old son is in Smiths Falls, so she does need a place in the town. The GoFundMe is asking for rental and moving cost help. So far, over $27,000 of a $30,000 goal has been reached. International aid is beginning to arrive to help India cope with a massive surge of COVID-19 infections. India's health system is under immense strain, the country adding an average nearly 350,000 new cases of COVID every single day. In fact, today it was nearly 380,000 new cases and more than 3,600 more deaths. India's foreign secretary says there is an acute shortage of oxygen and other hospital supplies.
There's been outpouring of assistance from various countries. Over 40 countries have actually committed to provide us with many of the items that we need most urgently.
Now, the U.S. and Britain have begun sending shipments of medical items. Canada, France, Germany, Ireland, Australia, they're all among those promising help. Transat AT has reached a loan arrangement with the federal government. This will help the travel company deal with financial fallout from the pandemic.
Transat AT announced the deal this morning that will allow it to borrow as much as $700 million. The cash will come through the federal government's large employer emergency financing facility, the same program used to help Air Canada earlier this month. Transat says $390 million will be used to help support its business, and $310 million will be used to reimburse travelers for canceled flights. Transat has endured a tough year, suspending all flights following Ottawa's request in January to halt travel to Mexico and the Caribbean because of COVID-19. Karen Rebo, the Canadian Press.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Inform your opinion.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's 3 days, but it's not 10 days. It's the most days, but it's not enough days. Paid sick days. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. Thursday, another busy one. Another busy day in the news game. Hard to find a politician who has something they want to say today. We have Conservative Aaron O'Toole news conference scheduled for this morning. Jagmeet Singh, NDP leader, news conference this morning. Annamie Paul, leader of Canada's Green Party, news conference, along with Mike Schreiner, leader of Ontario's Green Party, MPP for Guelph. We have the daily question period in the Ontario legislature around 10:30 this morning. Should be a hopping place, given everything that happened yesterday with paid sick days, paid sick days, paid sick days, and Doug Ford relents. He waves the white flag. He erases the line in the sand. And what once was not needed, what was once needless duplication and redundant, is now the best paid sick day program around, the best paid sick day program around that will save lives. Oh, you can bet. We have a lot of coverage of that story this morning here on the Rob Snow Show. It's 3 paid sick days and a promise to top up what's already on offer from the Trudeau government with its Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, the CRSB, that pays out $500 a week. Ford government pledging to top that up to $1,000 a week if the federal government is okay with that. But it's 3 paid sick days. 3. 1, 2, 3. Not 10 paid sick days, and therein lies the rub for a lot of people who say this plan from the Ford government, it just doesn't go far enough. They even accuse Premier Ford of being a big hypocrite. Because where's Ford? Where is Doug Ford? He's at the compound in Etobicoke, right? He's in isolation. He's not working. He was exposed to COVID-19. He is in isolation. But what's he doing? He's getting paid. He's getting paid, right? What did they say a few weeks ago? $800 a day. $800 a day. And yet, his critics will say, oh, Doug Ford, he's in it for the little guy. That's Doug Ford. He's in it for the little guy. He speaks so fondly about standing up for the little guy, and yet all he has on offer for the little guys, the low-paid essential workers, is 3 measly paid sick days. That's it. That's all. That's what his critics are saying. Okay? His political critics, his critics in the healthcare system, social justice, his critics in the news media. And it's not just that it's only 3 paid sick days. It's that they expire. This is a temporary paid sick day program. It's like it's on sale. It's a limited time offer. Get your paid sick days now. This offer will not last. One time only. Get them while they're here. Paid sick days expiring September 25th. And then it's back to, no paid sick days. So, as you can well imagine, a lot of people are not too impressed with that either. Let's begin with some political reaction this morning. David has some clips for us that he's going to play. Let us begin with Andrea Horvath saying 3 days is better than none, but it's not good enough.
3 days of paid leave is paid sick leave is better than none. But I don't know where the Premier thinks that this is the best paid sick days program in North America. It certainly is not. We know that other jurisdictions have done much better, and this government could have done better. They chose not to, and people will still have to make really difficult decisions because 3 days of paid sick time off is not enough if you're battling with COVID-19.
So we're going to get into all of this throughout the program between now and noon. We have author and post-media columnist Randall Denley. He's working on a column about this right now for the National Post. He's with us every Thursday morning. You know, Randall's been following every twist and turn of the Ford government's pandemic response. He's sure to have a hot take on this one. I mean, to me, the big questions are, why now? Okay. Why now? And why this? Okay. Why now and why 3 days? Why now? Is it because it's the right thing to do? Is it because it's the right thing to do? If that's the case, why didn't the Ford government do it last week? Or last month? Or last year, for that matter? Why now? Or are they doing it because they looked at the polls? They're being guided by not what's right or wrong, but by polling numbers. And they have seen a once double-digit lead in the polls vanish. Vanish in less than a month. In other words, are they doing it because of policy or are they doing it because of politics? And why 3 and not 10? That's the other big question. We tried to get someone from the government side to talk about this. We were chasing both the finance minister and the labor minister for the last day or so. Just wasn't meant to be. We couldn't get him on the program, which is kind of sad. Disappointed, but it has just been Gosh, it's been a brutal few weeks for the Ford government, hasn't it, in the news cycle? Have you ever seen anything like it? And yesterday's report on the Ford government's handling of the pandemic in long-term care homes, I mean, it doesn't help. It's not going to right the ship. There's not much really in the report from Bonnie Lysyk that hasn't been in the news already. I mean, it covers a lot of ground that's been well documented already. Ward rooms, okay? Ward rooms, 4 residents in a room, older homes. The lack of expertise within the homes on infection prevention and control, well documented. Staff working in more than one home during the run of a week because they're trying to put together full-time hours, trying to get a 40-hour work week. All of this we know already. How that contributed to the disaster, the tragedy of long-term care in Ontario. But there are some other angles that aren't as widely known, like the problems with how inspections of long-term care homes actually work and what the inspectors of the homes actually inspect and how that may have contributed to the disaster. Some of the shortcomings there. And one of the things that I take away from this latest Auditor General's report from Bonnie Lysyk, and she's on our program again this morning. I spoke with her this morning. What time are we doing that interview? We're going to play that at 9:30? 9:30. It's a good interview. We had a long talk. It's just the fact that her office, and even the people who have held her job before her, they've done so many of these reports. Going back years, spanning multiple governments. I mean, McGuinty, Wynne, Ford. She told me this morning her office has probably done a dozen reports into problems with Ontario's long-term care system. This is just the latest. There are like 11 before this one. So what is the destiny of this report? Is it just destined to be yet another report that goes on to be another doorstop in someone's office at Queen's Park? Also on the program this morning, rumors abound. Could golfers be teeing off this weekend? Adam Stanley, Canadian Press, it has been reported that there's intense lobbying behind the scenes happening to get the golf courses open again, what with Ontario being the only place in all of North America where you can't play a round of golf. Nothing official yet, but certainly a lot of buzz. There was a golf course in Tillsonburg. Opened last weekend. It's kind of like the Adamson barbecue of golf, I guess. Give me freedom. Give me golf. It just opened. It was apparently very busy. We'll get into that a little later in the show. Pat Uguccioni, Your Community Voice. He's the managing editor of those newspapers. We'll review what happened during yesterday's city council meeting. Rocco Rossi, CEO, Ontario Chamber of Commerce on paid sick days. Sandra Hanna, CEO, Neighbourhood Pharmacists Association. The latest on how our members are trying to keep up with the demand for the COVID-19 vaccinations, the vaccine scavenger hunt, the booking system, the wait lists, and the supply of vaccine. That's what you call a show. There can't be a show without you. The Talkback Hour, paid sick days. I have to get your take on that when we open up the phone lines after the 10 o'clock news at 750-1310. 750-1310. Join us, will you? Let's debate the big issues of the day. The hottest talk radio in town, The Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's a space that needs to be lived in. It's a space that people, have to have an experience of more than just art on the walls. I think, yes, the art on the walls is fun, and it's fun to walk around and see all the beautiful things, and the way Dominic and Edith have curated the gallery is certainly something worth seeing. But coming by and asking questions, again, to Dominic's point of view is, interrupt him, ask questions. I'm here on most of the days too. We have Lysyk that comes in, Nancy that comes in. So yeah, we have quite a few opportunities for people to come in and see the process, and of course ask a few questions. It's a great space. Basically, the one event that we did do, is the jazz shows, the jazz and blues shows. And I think the weird thing to let you know is that the acoustics in here are really amazing. I think that was the first thing that blew me away when we started doing shows, or when I was helping out with the shows. And the other part of the business too is we do rent it out for special occasions too. So a few weddings, birthday parties, product launches, that kind of thing. So they're also a lot of fun. We do have one artist that's from the States, but of the 30-odd artists, the rest are from either Quebec, Ontario, and one beautiful woman from BC. But yeah, it's definitely part of the philosophy to maintain and canvas and show the beauty that we have in our backyard. You have the very, very strong personalities in Edith and Dominic, of course. It's wonderful to see how that actually balances out in the rest of the gallery. Without necessarily being, an objective, we basically have half female artists and half male artists in this gallery. But I can't say it's anything more than choosing the best people, and that's just the way it is. And I love that. I think it's great. You go through and you're like, wow, it's all pretty cool. And yep, it's half are women and half are men. It's cool. Like everyone else, we didn't know what to think, right? It's overwhelming at first. You just know that things are closed. And now you're trying to figure out what you do during that downtime, which I think everyone did. And I think in March, the first close, the first shutdown, it was a lot of actually recuperating and resting and not worrying too much on the spot. It's running a gallery is a bit like running a marathon with sprints. So there comes a time where, it's actually nice to just take a break. And then you wake up and realize that, okay, now it's time to wake up and deal with this new reality. From my perspective anyways, I think a gallery can be overwhelming, and I like to make it fun. So you're going to come in, I'll ask you questions, I might even joke around with you. The most people come here, they're not really going to buy art, but they could have a fun time and talk about it, right? And one of the things the gallery does offer is for local purchases, we'll be happy to drive it to your house and hang it for you.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Say good morning to Post-Media columnist and author Randall Denley. Good morning, Randall Denley.
Morning, Rob.
What do you think of the paid sick day proposal from the Ford government?
I think it's quite generous, very reasonable. Whether it will do any good or not, of course, is a completely different matter, but politically, they reached the point where they had to do it.
Okay.
I'm writing about this for the Post today, Rob, and I guess there's a number of things about this. I think it relies on unproven assumptions, essentially. So we start out believing that Ontario was some kind of an outlier. I mean, everybody must have this paid sick stuff, right? It's just Ontario, and the cruel Doug Ford is not helping people. That's not true. Well, but the federal sick leave program, Ford has referred to that a number of times, and now he wants to double down on it. Oh, that's crazy, we're told. The program is broken. Now there's a real analysis. The program is broken. I can pretty much guarantee you this is an assertion that's almost always made by people who've never attempted to use it. I'll tell you how broken the program is. If you were sick with COVID this week, Monday, you can apply for benefits. In 3 to 5 days, you'll get the money deposited into your account. I'm not sure how much faster government can go, really. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other point we always hear about is that, the universal paid sick leave, it's going to have an incredible benefit. Well, how do we know that? Because when you look at what's happening in workplaces, you see workplaces like Maple Leaf Foods, Canada Post, Amazon, they have paid sick leave. They still have significant outbreaks. So it's not a panacea for that. We just don't know what benefit this is going to have. It'll have some, I think. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that we never hear about is asymptomatic transmission. it's not raised in this context. Where instead, I was given the picture that a worker is desperately sick with COVID, but has to feed his children, so he goes off to work and affects everybody else. I think it's a much more likely scenario that a worker who has COVID, feels fine, has no symptoms, goes off to work and has no idea he's infecting other people until after the fact.
And then there's a workplace outbreak.
Yes.
Yeah.
But at the asymptomatic part of it, which you can do nothing about, except rapid testing, which we're not talking about, that's never mentioned. It's always put out as workers are beleaguered, no one's helping them, they're forced to go into the workplace. It's a very compelling picture, but I'm not sure how accurate it is.
Okay. So why do you think they relented?
Oh, I think the political pressure became unbearable, really, but I also thought it was fairly clever politically, the way they played it. And they said, well, Mr. Trudeau, you've got a program, we're prepared to double it. And the beauty of that is that you can start helping people immediately without inventing anything new, creating any new bureaucracy, any new burden on business or anything else. Oh, wow, the federal government wasn't going to touch that. And really, tell me one good reason why they wouldn't touch it. Even just, if you only look at it through a political point of view, here's a chance for the federal government to provide twice as much money to people in vote-rich Ontario at no cost to themselves. Why would they say no to that? It's all part of, I think, the very weird approach the federal government's taken on this, where they want to position themselves, well above the provinces, and the poor little provinces are screwing up this, they're screwing up that, but we're here to help. Okay, they're here to help. So then a province says, okay, here's the help we need. No, we're not doing that. It would cost them nothing. It makes no sense to me.
Well, you have to do something about provincially regulated businesses, and we'll take care of the federally regulated businesses, as though Mr.
Whatever those are.
Yeah, right. As though, but it's also, as though Mr. Trudeau is, when it comes to provincial authority, that's like sacred when it comes to Mr. Trudeau, right? It's just so, it's not, not carbon taxes, not childcare, cost sharing, but, on this one, no, we can't cross that threshold.
He wants to work directly with employers to solve this problem. Right. But of course, his government's doing the opposite. It's working directly with workers. People who are very upset about this federal approach say, it's terribly onerous to place this burden on workers to go get this free money. But it's exactly the same burden that's placed on workers for CERB and its successor. People don't seem to have a problem with doing it. I mean, it's an online thing. It's done through the CRA. It's pretty simple. And it's free money. So why wouldn't you do it? They've already given well over $400 million, so someone's doing it. Can't be that hard. And then they say, well, okay, the fallback argument is, but people aren't using the federal program because, they're not aware of it. Well, maybe they've heard the continuous every day of the week message from people advocating for sick pay and saying, there's no sick pay. There is no sick pay. You really can't get through a day without hearing that.
No, it's been...
So then if you're a worker, you might think, I guess there's no sick pay. I've heard that like 10 times in the media. All kinds of people are telling me that. So why would I even go look?
Right. Yeah, okay. So let's move along from that then. Let me ask you what you thought of the long-term care audit report.
I thought it was relatively useless. The problem is that there's been too many examinations of exactly the same problem. We knew what the problem was before the pandemic. The government's been acting, I think, quite vigorously to try to deal with the problem. But it's, the Auditor General said, well, there'll be no surprises in a report, and there weren't. The one thing that did jump out at me a little bit, though, is the after the fact criticism of, they moved hospital patients into long-term care. I mean, what a crazy thing to do. I mean, it was hardly a crazy thing to do at the time because, you remember a year ago we thought the apocalypse was around the corner. Hospitals were going to be overwhelmed. Clear the decks, get ready for a flood of COVID patients. And pretty much every hospital in the province has significant numbers of alternate level of care patients, as they call them. They're people who don't need acute hospital care, but there's no spot for them in long-term care, so they're sort of stuck in the hospital waiting. Now, lack of home care is also a factor, but they don't need to be in the hospital. So the government put them into long-term care homes. I mean, in the end, that did put them at risk, but it was still a sensible thing to do to free up hospital capacity for incoming COVID patients. So and now they're doing it again. Same kind of thinking. You've got to use hospital resources for people who need to be in a hospital. Why would you keep people who don't need to be in a hospital in a pandemic when you're short of beds if you can put them someplace else? There should have been better support in long-term care, but I just think moving the people in itself wasn't the problem.
Dr. Fullerton was taking a lot of heat yesterday because she placed a lot of the blame for the situation in long-term care on the previous government. Do you think she has a point there?
So.
Yeah, rightly so. Yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about, homes that are overcrowded at 3 and 4 to a room, I mean, they're designed that way, but the previous government never fixed that. They knew it was a problem.
Yeah.
They didn't expand the sector. They didn't do much to modernize or upgrade the sector. Standards are relatively low. It's not something you're going to fix overnight. It's easy to say, well, there should be many more qualified staff. Okay, but where are they going to come from? You can't just order them up and tell them to come to work on Monday. And I think it's the tone we see in a lot of the criticism of the pandemic response in long-term care. Well, they weren't prepared. They didn't have everything perfectly ready to go. Like, no one was prepared. Nothing was prepared. So, okay, they weren't prepared, but who was? Who would we look to in Ontario or Canada to say, wow, those people were ready for it. Man, they did a great job. Nobody did. So the thing that concerns me about these kind of reports, and we'll see another one tomorrow, is that are they really going to help, or do they just perpetuate the image that the whole industry is a disaster at a time when we actually need long-term care and we need more of it?
We will need a lot more of it.
Right, and to me, that's the big point, is the government has quite an aggressive program of expanding the capacity of long-term care and increasing staffing. So really, you're turning around to a government that didn't create the problem, has put in place some pretty good solutions, and saying, what's wrong with you people? Why haven't you fixed this yesterday? Because it isn't something that can be fixed yesterday. But it's hard for people to accept that, because we're kind of hardwired to say, a government screw-up, who's going to be held to account?
Okay. Thank you.
Federal government, of course, and then to say, well, nobody will be held to account. It's just one of those things.
Right. Thank you for this morning, Randall Denley.
Okay,
Great pleasure.
problem.
Yeah. Post Media Columnist, his latest for the National Post, will be published today. It will be about paid sick days. I'll look for it on the National Post website. Bonnie Lysyk is Ontario's Auditor General. She joins me right after the news on City News.
This hour of the Rock. local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, April 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 11 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 10. And here's what's making news this hour. Auditor General report into long-term care in Ontario looked at overcrowding, underfunding, understaffing, and the amount of preparation for a pandemic described as woeful. Rob Snow will speak with the Auditor General coming up in just a couple of minutes on City News. Later this afternoon, the latest modelling numbers of COVID in our province will be released. Since the province went into its latest emergency order, has anything changed? The modelling numbers are due out at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Latest numbers of COVID infections in the province and area health units expected in the next half hour or so. Already this week, numbers in Ottawa, for example, have fluctuated between just over 150 to just over 200 cases a day. Controversial legislation that will send more than 1,100 dock workers back on the job in the Port of Montreal goes to the Senate tomorrow. House of Commons approved this bill after debate that ran until about 2 o'clock this morning. Workers at the port have been without a contract since December of 2018. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Ontario's Auditor General released the findings of her special report yesterday into Ontario's long-term care system, residents so hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. The report makes 16 recommendations at all, and here to review her findings is Ontario's Auditor General Bonnie Lysyk. Good morning.
Good morning.
You say Ontario's long-term care homes were ill-prepared to prevent or minimize COVID-19 outbreaks. What factors were at work?
You know, I think there's a bit of history here in terms of the SARS. When you go back and Ontario experienced SARS, there were a number of recommendations that were made to improve the system so that if there was an outbreak that we would be more prepared in Ontario. So we have some of that history where recommendations were not fully implemented. And long-term care homes were one of them where they did not have pandemic plans in place that were current and up-to-date. We also saw that there are a lot of systemic weaknesses in the long-term care system, such as staffing shortages, inconsistent practices in infection prevention and control that existed prior to COVID. As well, a lot of the long-term care homes in Ontario still have 3 or 4 occupant rooms versus 1 and 2. And so, in terms of containing the spread of COVID, that posed some difficulties as well. Plus, the long-term care sector has sort of been like a second cousin. And so they weren't integrated into the healthcare system in Ontario. And so when COVID hit, they were pretty much left on their own at the beginning to try and figure out, so each home's senior management, to try and figure out what they needed to do to, protect their staff and their residents. And that posed a significant problem.
Okay. So let's dig into some of those issues a little bit more. As you mentioned before, there was COVID-19, there was the SARS outbreak. What lessons could have been learned from SARS that it could have been useful in limiting the loss of life in long-term care from COVID-19?
Yeah, I think the real importance of the precautionary principle. So when something like this happens, instead of waiting for the science to make decisions that are just logical in terms of separating individuals, quarantining individuals before you truly understand how the virus is spread.
Okay. What role did the so-called ward rooms play in this tragedy, Auditor?
Yeah, so the rooms, there are a considerable number of rooms in the long-term care homes that still house 3 or 4 people. It's a huge number. They haven't been converted over to 1 or 2 person rooms. The standards in the province since 1999 have been to encourage only 1 or 2 people in rooms. The licensing, though, of the older homes allowed them to continue without doing the renovations. And so those licenses are expiring in 2025. And so, at this point, I know that the government has committed money to renovating some of those rooms. But that did contribute to the inability to isolate people within the home. So they needed solutions. They needed help to decide how to move people out of the homes into more safer accommodations.
Did you look at the delivery model, private versus not-for-profit? Was one sector necessarily better at managing the pandemic than the other? Did you look at that at all as part of your report?
We saw some correlations. So, for instance, the for-profit sector is the sector that has more of the housing of 3 or 4 people in a room, and so consequentially, they would have been impacted. They had higher numbers that you could attribute to some of the difficulties in moving people. We also saw that, the municipal long-term care homes had more attention given to them before the outbreak in terms of their infection and prevention control procedures. And so they sort of weathered it, somewhat better than the rest of the system. And a lot of the success of the homes that didn't experience COVID had to do with them having better infection prevention and control procedures, or else being not as not existing or sort of residing in areas of the province where there were hot spots. So we did see that some of the private sector long-term care homes did experience more and had more turnover of the PSW staff.
Okay. You say that long-term care in Ontario is largely, your words, disconnected from other institutions in the healthcare system. What do you mean by that, and how did it affect pandemic response?
Right. So, for one example, the long-term inspection group exists in the Ministry of Long-Term Care. And they have, they can do inspections. They are the ones responsible for doing inspections. But when it comes to infection prevention and control, they don't have the expertise in that area. They may have some people that have the expertise, but this is not their specialty. Whereas the inspectors in the public health units, this is their specialty. And unfortunately, they weren't the ones in all cases that were doing the inspections of the long-term care homes. So there's a disconnect there between the public health inspectors and the long-term care inspectors. So our recommendations in this report are that it makes more sense for the public health inspectors to do the inspection of infection prevention and control in the long-term care homes and provide that information to the long-term care inspectors in terms of enforcement and compliance, and so that they can use it for enforcement and compliance. So that's one area. The other is relationships with the hospitals. At the end of the day, the pandemic showed that if the homes that had outstanding or standing relationships with hospitals versus the one that didn't fared better because they benefited from hospitals' expertise, again, in infection prevention and control. So more partnership, as well as looking at long-term care, not just in isolation, but in the context of home care, assisted living, retirement homes, and how that all fits together for planning all aspects of the care for seniors in Ontario.
I just want to circle back to the situation with inspections of long-term care homes and your recommendations. So what would typically then inspectors of long-term care homes be inspecting if they're not looking out for infection control? What are they looking at then? What would their job be?
In our report, we have a listing of some of the areas that they would look at. They would look at the cleanliness of the facility. They would look at medication administration. They would look at various aspects of plan of care for residents. We do have another recommendation in that area where we think more focus and more testing on the plans of care for residents needs to happen, because historically that has been the area where there have been more complaints and incidents and findings from previous inspections that that area deserves more of their attention. They'd be seeing how the food is being given to residents, what the food content is in terms of, menus and things like that. So, just basically the operations of the long-term care home would be within their mandate.
The situation with the staff, the long-term care staff, working in more than one home, say during the course of a week, how did that contribute to this tragedy? Because I know there was a move from the government to tighten that up, but it seems as though there were, I don't know if loopholes is the right term, but certainly there was... their temporary agencies seem to be exempt, for example. How do you think that contributed to things?
Right. So, yes, they came out with a directive indicating that PSWs would have to choose, if they were part-time employees of the homes, they'd have to choose, which home they would get more hours in or just work in, whereas agencies were still able to decide which homes they went to and move the agency PSWs to different homes. So there was an inconsistency there, in terms of how much that contributed to the outbreaks. I don't have the data. We don't have the data on that. There's certain information that wasn't being tracked. And so, but that was something that was different. Now, the consequence of that is that there were less hands to take care of the residents. Mm-hmm. At the same time, there was a directive where family members wouldn't be allowed, and for good reason. I mean, at the beginning, they didn't want more COVID coming into the home, so they tried to restrict the number of people coming in. But we've recommended that they need to sit back and think, that caregivers, family members are sometimes the people that supplement the resources of PSWs in homes, and they feed their relatives or parents and they dress them. And so there needs to be some consideration of that should this ever happen again.
Okay. How many reports do you think your office has done on Ontario's long-term care system over the years?
We've done, the last one we did was in 2015. 2017 was a follow-up of the 2015. So we've done there two. We've also looked at food and nutrition in the long-term care home. So we've done a couple there. And then we've also looked at outbreak planning in the long-term care homes, and that resulted in a couple, and then subsequent follow-up. So probably about maybe, I would say, 6 to 8 reports in the last number of years. Some of our other work has touched on it, consequentially, like palliative care has touched on it. So maybe, maybe we've covered this subject in about, overall 10, maybe 12 reports.
Okay. And this one will be added to the list. Let's hope change can result from it. Thank you so much for this morning, Auditor General Bonnie Lysyk. Nice to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
We just took over this business about a few weeks prior to the pandemic, but we've been loving the community, the people, very friendly. But it's been very difficult starting up a new business, just the time that we did, but I'm sure it's the same everywhere. We did take a broken business, which doesn't help us, but we thought we believe in what we do. We're very passionate about food, and we just really wanted to share the Iraqi culture through our food. All our recipes are homemade, so this is very unique. Usually you hear restaurants, shops, it's all frozen food or prepared food. So nothing here is prepared, everything is homemade. We get our meat and produce from a local farm. So supporting local is the way to go. We are supporting all the way. And our meat are actually marinated the day of, so it's as fresh as can be. Quality ingredients and everything is made from scratch. I get a lot of people when they come in, they say it tastes like Middle Eastern, like back home. So for you to have been to Iraq and had the food there, you can really like compare and see the similarity. We do like to focus on healthy. So our recipes, not only the homemade, again, everything is from scratch, but we have like from combos and to like small sandwiches. Our one of our favorites and very popular is the chicken salad and the beef salad. So now you're getting all the protein and all these amazing ingredients that we all need. During this time, I find a lot of people are sitting at home and not enough movement. So to come here and get something healthy other than go elsewhere and just put, what's not so good for our bodies, makes a huge difference. So we have shawarma sandwiches, combos. I mean, if you're looking for a meal to feed your family, I would highly recommend the family platter. It comes literally with everything, with potatoes, with rice, with chicken, with beef, and we don't charge extra for mix. I know a lot of places do. Here we just add everything to your platter. And lots of healthy choices for sure. We're very passionate about food, and for our small family business, it's been good. Like I said, it's a little struggle, but we are not a chained restaurant.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Time to talk some city issues. Pat Uguccioni's the managing editor at Your Community Voice newspapers. Welcome back.
Good morning.
The award-winning, I understand it, Your Community Voice newspapers. Is that right?
We are. Last week, the Ontario Community Newspapers Association had their Better Newspaper Awards competition, and our Stittsville-Richmond paper was awarded the silver medal in its circulation class, so we're very happy about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I give all the credit to our local historian, John Curry, who's been in the local news business for a good 50 years in this city. So.
And why do you give him all the credit?
Well, he's our local historian. Nothing's happened in the west end of the city
that he doesn't know about.
That he doesn't know about. Right. He knows everybody, and everybody knows him. And the outpouring of affection for him since we got that award has been
good.
Been amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's award season, right?
It is.
Nomadland wins Best Picture, and Your Community Voice walks away with some awards. So
and we did ours virtually, too. So.
How are the ratings, Pat? Are the ratings? No.
Well, the last time I checked, I think there was 21 people online. So.
No, but I mean, community newspapers, they're so important. I mean, all newspapers are important, the daily broadsheets, the tabloids, but these, the community newspapers, we have... Bruce McIntyre on every week from the Eganville Leader, which also won some awards as well. So,
I mean, the judges just quickly said, I mean, it's very obvious that we have a very close connection with our community, and of course, I agree with that.
Well, it's amazing. 2 years ago, I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day, and I was because we forget what the news was back in 2019, because in 2020 everything changed, and around this time in 2019, you and me both. I mean, it would have been end-to-end flood coverage.
That's right. Yeah, in 2019, yes.
And your newspaper would have been filled with that. Every story in the paper would have been about Constance Bay and Dunrobin and everything else, right?
Well, so, our West Carleton edition certainly was, and our
Fitzroy Harbor and places
Aaron
like that.
Was there,
Yeah. 2 years ago. What was making news 2 years ago?
That's right.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Floods, tornadoes, floods.
And I saw a report earlier this week that the Ottawa River is actually quite a bit below norm. So
right, okay. Yeah. Well, we've got a flood of other news now, of course.
Yeah.
So let's get into what happened at the City Council meeting yesterday. And first of all, I want your reaction to the letter from Councillor Deans that was co-signed by 15 members of council. So not everybody signed it, but 15 of them did. And it calls on the Ford government to reopen outdoor activities like tennis and golf, for example. What do you think about how that came together?
Well, politicians can't help being politicians, right? So there's a bit of politicking there. There was a council meeting, but this wasn't discussed at the council meeting. There was no motion, no discussion at all. This came about sort of late in the evening through a flurry of email exchanges with Councillor Diane Deans looking for support for a letter to be sent to the Premier to reopen these facilities, and also they're looking to open skateboard parks and basketball courts as well. So 15 or 16 of them did sign on, but some didn't, and some of them notably are in our coverage area. Councillor Hubley, Councillor Suds, and Councillor Moffat didn't sign on to it. Not that they don't agree with it, but they just didn't agree with the process of doing policy over the email late into the evening. So.
What do they think the policy should have been? I mean, for example, one of the things I would like to know is what does Dr. Etches think about that, for example, right? I mean, that's the big one, right?
Well, that's exactly what Councillor Suds, for example, says that sending a letter, like this, trying to get input isn't the way you should do it. We need a proper debate at council, which could have happened during the day, and there's no input in this letter from Dr. Etches, and that should have been done, and it probably would have had more weight if it would have been signed by the mayor and unanimous amount of councillors.
Did the mayor sign that letter?
The mayor's signature is not on the letter.
Oh, well, no.
I don't know if he was asked, but
well, the last time he was on my program was Monday of last week, and at that time he didn't sound like he was in favor of closing tennis courts and golf courses, for that matter. So
yeah, I mean, he had his mayor's breakfast this morning that was live streamed, and he didn't speak specifically to this letter, but he did say, right now with what's going on, it's not the time to be seeking any exemptions to any provincial guidelines. So
okay, all right, we'll get to the what I call click and wait, the vaccine scavenger hunt, in just a second. But I wasn't really surprised, given it sailed through the committee, that when it came to the council, that the regulations will go into effect for Airbnb. What do you think of that? How that all played out?
Well, I mean, there was an odd recommendation in that proposal, and I think unanimously everybody agrees that they needed to curb some of this Airbnb stuff. But there was at committee, it was passed unanimously that these Airbnbs, once they're licensed, could have a capacity of up to 32 people. It didn't make sense at the time, and so at council yesterday, Diane Deans brought a motion to limit that to 8. And then, through some back and forth, a proposal by Councillor Hubley was to cap it at 10. So that's where the cap is now. And even at that, there was a couple of councillors like, Scott Moffat, who has 5 children, didn't like that cap because, if he's trying to go, outside the city, his family sort of meets that cap with when you add in mom and dad and grandma and grandpa. So there was some back and forth on that. But I think 10 seems to be a good cap.
Well, one of the issues that was brought up yesterday was Sue Sharing, who actually brought it up, is what about people who travel for hockey tournaments and whatnot, right? And you think about pre-COVID days, Bell Capital Cup and things like that. I mean, there are a lot of people who would come to this city to attend.
That was sort of the gist of the conversation yesterday. But when you live in a residential community, you don't really expect to live beside a motel. Some of these hockey tournaments. I mean, if the cap was 32. You have 32, kids with, running around backyards and making, a lot of noise like kids do. Is that really what a residential community should put up with? And they tend to be the same addresses. It's not like everybody in my subdivision does it, but there's certainly problem parts around the city. That is that really fair to have a hockey team or a dance troupe living next door a few times a year?
The mayor's office, they're listening. Hello. Says the mayor didn't sign that letter with the 15 other councillors because he's following Dr. Etch's advice.
Yeah, which is basically what he said at the mayor's breakfast this morning. And, and like I said, he didn't address the letter, but I'm sure that's what he was referring to.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. Are you vaccinated? You had a dose?
I did.
How do you think it's going, the whole rollout right now?
Well, I don't think there's any age group or anyone that's satisfied with the rollout, but I mean, it all comes down to supply, right? But I did get my vaccine 2 Saturdays ago now. I got the AstraZeneca at a pharmacy close to my house. I went online and I signed up for a few of them and was notified by one and canceled my others, which I think is an issue if people aren't canceling some of their appointments. So,
well, it was certainly, good point there, Pat. This was the mayor yesterday on that very issue that... some people are on 15, 18 wait lists because they're, it's a scavenger on trying to get a shot. Play that clip, David.
If I could plead with members of the public, please do not go out and register 5, 10, 15 times with different pharmacies. It's clogging up the system. The system, a lot of people find, is very frustrating at this point because there are different ways based on the different pharmacies how you get registered and whether you get notified in a wait list or so on. But far too many people are reporting back to me that they have individual friends who are booking one case in Manotick, 18 different pharmacies.
18 different pharmacies.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
But I mean, who can blame people? They really want to get this. Obviously, I mean, there's no issue in Ottawa as there seems to be in parts of Toronto that people are reluctant to get them. So obviously, when they drop the age group to 45, a lot of people want to get that.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is some of the family physicians in the city are starting to get some of the AstraZeneca. So it'd be nice if they all got them, so we could all go to our own family physician to do this.
Okay. Great to hear from you, and congratulations once more to the staff at your Community Voice on the well-deserved awards at the Community Newspaper Association Awards, Pat. It's well-earned. It's well-earned. Thank you. Yeah. Pat Uguccioni, Managing Editor, Your Community Voice. 1 hour down, your hour next. It's the Talk Back Hour. What do you think? 3 paid sick days on offer from the Doug Ford government. Is that good enough for you? 750-1310 on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
This 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, April 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 11 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 10. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Latest COVID-19 case numbers in Ontario, 3,871 more cases today. 41 more deaths in Ontario. Locally, there are 209 cases in Ottawa, 31 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, 10 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 10 new cases in Renfrew. The case numbers come from just under 57,000 tests. The positivity rate is dropping at least to 7.6%. After releasing a report into the status of Ontario's long-term care system amid the province's Auditor General says the government did not adequately prepare the sector for COVID-19. Bonnie Lysyk has recommendations made following the SARS outbreak in 2003 that were not fully implemented in long-term care homes, leaving some without any pandemic plan. She tells the Rob Snow Show there is a disconnect from the long-term care system and the province's healthcare system.
And so they weren't integrated into the healthcare system in Ontario. And so when COVID hit, they were pretty much left on their own at the beginning to try and figure out. So each home's senior management to try and figure out what they needed to do to, protect their staff and their residents, and that posed a significant problem.
Now, Lysyk adds municipally run long-term care homes often had a higher level of care before the pandemic, while situations are often worse in for-profit homes. City News Time, 10:03. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls today, generally just a lot of cloud. We get into that steadier rain for the evening. 18 the high today. More rain overnight, 9 for the low. And tomorrow, periods of rain, high about 11 with a gusty wind. For today, the high 18.
And right now it is 11 degrees in Ottawa. It's 10 degrees in Smiths Falls. More than 400 days into the pandemic, the provincial government is introducing legislation today to cover sick pay. The Premier promised it would be the best plan in North America. Reviews, though, not exactly glowing. Here's City News reporter Kevin Meisner.
The legislation will give Ontario workers 3 paid sick days. Workers will get $200 per day. It'll be paid by their employers up front. The Ford government's move comes after months of intense pressure from labor and health experts, even the province's own science advisory table. NDP leader Andrea Horvath says the plan still falls short of what's really needed.
3 days of paid sick time off is not enough if you are battling with COVID-19. I don't know what the government thinks people are going to be able to do.
Peel Region ER physician Dr. Gabriel Stephen tells City News this plan is the bare minimum.
And then the other piece also is that it's not permanent.
The sick leave plan does expire in September. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business is happy the plan doesn't place any added cost on already struggling businesses. Kevin Meisner, Queen's Park.
Now, much more on this subject coming up on the Rob Snow Show in the 11 o'clock hour. On Saturday, Ottawa police will be back with their Project Noisemaker. This is police targeting speeding, stunt driving, and excessive noise in the city. The enforcement will be morning, noon, and night, and police say city streets are not anyone's personal racetrack. Police did crack down on these specific offenses last year in a targeted approach and stopped an average 10 stunt drivers a week, doling out 2,300 tickets. Now, since the start of this month, police have issued 4,000 tickets, including a driver we told you about this week, stopped for the 4th time for stunt driving. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
The Doug Ford government is offering workers 3 paid sick days. 3 paid sick days. Legislation introduced today in the Ontario legislature. What is your reaction to this news, please? 750-1310. 750-1310. 750-1310. Another flip-flop from Ford. Is 3 days enough? What's your opinion on that? Should it be 10 days? A lot of the opponents to Doug Ford, there are a lot of them. Say it should be 10 days. 3 days, not enough. The program, as well as you just heard in our newscast, it will expire in late September, September 25th. It's a temporary program. Should it be a permanent program? What do you think about that? 750-1310. And why do you think, what is the motivation here? Why do you think the Ford government is doing it? Is it doing it because it's the right thing to do? Or is it doing it because Ford is tanking in the polls? 750-1310, 750-1310. What a saga this has been. And as well this morning, we've talked about it all week. I want to talk about it again today. I want any and all updates on the vaccine scavenger hunt. How goes the search for the shot today? Have you had your first dose of vaccine? I am especially interested in hearing from people who qualify for a first shot of vaccine because the age limit has been lowered for AstraZeneca. Have you had your first dose? What has it been like to try and book an appointment? How is this system, in air quotes, this system working for you? Call, click, and wait. Call, click, and wait. Hope and pray. Call, click, and wait. Get on a wait list. Get on 10 wait lists. Get on 20 wait lists and hope someone calls you back. Share your experiences. I would like to know how it's going for everyone today at 750-1310, 750-1310. If you don't call, I'm always down for a polka-thon. It's been a while since we played some polka music. We can always do that. Don't you worry. A polka always on standby. Brendan in Blackburn Hamlet.
Good morning.
Yeah, hi, Brendan. 3 paid sick days. Doug Ford going to offer 3 paid sick days to workers in Ontario. What is your reaction to that news?
Well, it's very confusing.
Okay.
However, because if some individual wakes up and does not feel well, I just don't understand why they don't take their temperature as they enter any grocery store or plant or to verify their temperature as they enter the building.
That this could be prevented. Do you think some of these workplace outbreaks could be prevented with better workplace screening, for example?
Well, there's no question. Look at the baby powder plant run by the Chinese in it's either Mississauga, I think, where they say this is the way we do it in China, and they could care less about the staff,
Okay, yeah, but one of the issues is, and Randall Denley brought this up in the last hour. One of the problems is somebody can be contagious with COVID-19, not even know they have COVID-19, right? Asymptomatic spread. That's part of the problem.
Yes, it all boils down to your temperature. If your temperature is 108 degrees.
Well, I mean, if your temperature is 108 degrees, you're not long for the world, Brendan.
That's right.
So, okay, what I want to get at is, for the longest time, you're following the news, right? You're not listening to the Rob Snow Show if you're not paying attention to the news. I know you're paying attention to the news. Oh, yes.
I get up at 5:30 in the morning, and I listen to the CBC and...
Right. So, look. So, Doug Ford has been resisting this, right?
Yes.
There have been calls for this for months and months and months. We need paid sick days. We need paid sick days. And he says, no, Mr. Trudeau has paid sick days. Go apply to Mr. Trudeau's program, right?
Well, compared to Biden in the States, he's going to offer much more than Ford is.
Well, yeah, okay. We're a little outside the wheelhouse there today, Brendan. I'm going to move along. I thank you for your call, though. Let's try and stick to the heart of the matter here. There were no paid sick days, and now there are going to be 3 paid sick days. And the big criticism is that it should be 10 paid sick days. Should it be 10 paid sick days? Should it be permanent? What do you think? Brian in Ottawa. What do you think, Brian?
Hey, Rob.
Hi.
Well, the reason Ford canceled it in the first place is because it duplicates the Canada Sick Recovery Benefit. And Ontario doesn't have it at the moment, but neither do most of the other provinces. I think only 2 other provinces have their own on top of the federal program.
2 provinces. Quebec has 2 paid sick days a year. Prince Edward Island has 1 after you've been employed for more than 5 years. You get 1 paid sick day a year, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a duplicate of the federal program. We're topping it up.
Right.
So why is everybody jumping on Ford and saying nothing about the other provinces?
Well, I guess, this is Peel, Toronto, these are where the hot spots are. And a paid sick day program from the Manitoba government isn't going to do much about the warehouses in Peel. I guess that's their point, Brian.
Well, I mean, he tried, if I remember correctly, he tried to get a hold of Trudeau and offer to top up the federal program without creating Ontario.
And it may still be topped up.
Well, Trudeau's not cooperating. He says, make your own.
Right. Okay. Let me ask you, though. Now he has, and it's 3 days.
Yeah.
So, by the sounds of it for you, what, is he being too generous here?
I think he's being more than fair.
More than fair. Okay.
Fair.
All right, Brian. Thank you.
Ontario has a problem, and he's helping out.
All right. Okay. Ontario has a problem, and Doug Ford's helping out. Okay. Marie. Hi, Marie. Alexander.
How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I'm on this side of the grass, so that's good, right? Okay.
Yeah, so I got my first shot.
Oh, congratulations.
And you know what? The whole process, like from doing it online, and I did it with my phone.
Yes.
I did it for myself, my husband. It took 2 minutes for each.
Yeah.
And then yesterday when we went, it was at the arena there in Alexandria.
Right.
It was the whole process, like, because you got to add the 15 minutes, you got to wait,
Afterwards,
it took maybe half an hour for me to go through everything. It was fantastic.
Good for you. What vaccine did you get?
Pfizer. Yeah.
No problems?
When I looked at the whole setup, I said, these guys, like the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, they really, really had to think. Like it was really smart how they thought, like, okay, your 15 minutes is over. You turn your chair around the other, opposite way. That way they know they have to clean that chair. Everything was cleaned after each person.
Yes. Well, that's good. When do you get your second dose?
In August 18th.
August 18th. Okay.
Yeah. Contrary to manufacturers'
Not exactly what it says on the label, right?
No.
Okay. All right. So Doug Ford is offering workers 3 paid sick days. What's your reaction to that? Is 3 enough? Should it be 10 paid sick days?
Look, I don't know. I come from a work environment that was that had a very strong union.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of sick days compared to that. And they were, anyway, so look, I think it's probably necessary, because I'm not in that position to really know. It's probably necessary. But on the other hand, I think he's being crushed by the unions, and they have these horrible commercials going on all the time against Doug Ford, and I think that's disgusting because, I looked at the guy, I saw him do the whole speech when he became emotional, and this guy, he's the best premier I've ever seen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I like him a lot.
You do?
He's a very
Even
very
after
good
all of
premier.
this, you still like him a lot, even after all of this?
All of it. It's nothing. It's all like brouhaha created by the unions.
Okay. All right.
That to me.
Okay.
So that's my little 2 cents for today.
Okay, thank you. I enjoy your 2 cents. Okay, let's stop here. It's the Talkback Hour. Look, 3 paid sick days on offer after opposition from the Ford government for months, if not a year or more. And the critics say it's not enough, that it needs to be 10 paid sick days or it's not going to be worth much. And it's a temporary program that would expire on the 25th of September. And the critics say, why are you putting an expiry date on this? You should make it permanent. I want to know what you think about this at 750-1310 on the Talkback Hour on the Rob Snow Show on City News. Highbridge Construction.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned, we have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter, That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise, and people. And for us, we have to be careful, you know, especially with the virus going on. Like, did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, you know, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You know, you can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was like thought it's gonna be like this. You know, earthquake might happen. We joke about it before. Think it might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive? That's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy because we have to shut down completely, you know? And this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online. Let's say t-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit. But when it comes to clothing, like it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, I mean, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really wanna shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You wanna be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend, doesn't matter how much money, 300 or 2,000, you know? You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, you know, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at a certain time, so I'm glad to do that.
Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
So a number of people have mentioned the teachers' ads from the unions that they're hearing on this radio station. But you have Doug Ford is a little more than a year out from an election campaign. June of next year will be the election. So you hear a lot of radio ads from the teachers' unions, and one reason for that is because of spending limits for third parties and the new rules that came into effect just prior to the last election. They were passed by the Wynne government because her party, the Ontario Liberals, lost the support of a lot of unions, teachers' unions, and that was when they decided, hey, we better limit the amount of money that teachers' unions can spend because now they hate us too. And so it kind of goes tiered. So right now they can spend an unlimited amount of members' dues on Doug Ford attack ads, and they seem to be doing that because, I mean, like we love the business, don't get me wrong, we appreciate the patronage, but eventually 6 months out from the election there's going to be a spending limit that kicks in. It's going to be $600,000 in the 6 months prior to the election call, and then once the writ drops they can only spend $100,000 across the entire province, which might get you a full-page ad or two in one newspaper. So they're spending all the money now. But we're talking about paid sick days. Paid sick days. 3 paid sick days on offer from the Ford government. Your reaction is 3 days enough? Should it be 10 days? The critics say it should be 10 days. And the program will expire in late September. So it's a temporary program. Critics say it should be a permanent program. Let's listen to a little bit of The reaction to this yesterday, this is Andrea Horvath with a question from reporter Colin DeMello.
If they ask for unanimous consent to pass the legislation right away, are you going to give them that consent?
We're going to have to look at the legislation, Colin, and I guess my response is we'll have to see what's in there before we can make any decisions whatsoever. They had a chance to table a bill just a few minutes ago. They didn't do it, so we don't even know what their legislation is going to look like. So we're going to have to take a look at it.
Okay, another question for Andrea Horvath about the NDP government in British Columbia doesn't have paid sick days.
What do you make of the fact that BC really hasn't done anything either?
Well, I mean, I don't know what's happening politically in British Columbia around paid sick days. Certainly, I'm not in Mr. Horgan's shoes and Premier Horgan's shoes. But certainly, I think paid sick days are something that every worker, regardless of what province you live in, should be able to access, pandemic or no pandemic.
I love that. It was the same kind of response that I got from Michael Cotto when I asked him about BC. I don't really know what's going on.
Well, I mean, I don't know what's happening politically in British Columbia.
Who pays attention to know what's going on in BC? Well, a lot of people do because that's the great shining light of the left-wing movement in all of Canada. It's John Horgan, right? Majority BC government. Most popular premier in the country. Oh, I don't really know what's going on. Oh, give me a break. James on paid sick days.
Good morning.
Yeah.
I think 3 days is fine. The Ontario Science Table didn't specify a number. If they thought that there was some strong evidence for 5 or 10 or 30 sick days, they would have actually put the number in there. I believe the infamous 6 recommendations. So Ford was told by or asked by the Ontario Science Table to have 6 days, and he picked a number which is more than Quebec and certainly more than PEI, etc. So I think the free 6 days is fine.
Okay.
As far as the expiry,
should it be permanent?
Well, as far as the expiry, the federal program ends September 25th as well. So I mean, I haven't heard anyone complaining about the federal sickness benefit expiring. Should that not be permanent? People get sick all the time, right? So this is dedicated to, this is all about COVID.
Yeah.
That's what people were talking about, and all of a sudden this, now the Horvath, et cetera, are turning it into, it's not just about COVID, it's overall benefits. So I'd like to, it expires, I think.
It should be part of the social welfare apparatus in Ontario.
Well, but the federal NDP agreed to, and said it was a fantastic program, the federal Canada sickness recovery benefit. It expires the same week as the Ontario proposed benefit, which is September 25th, I believe, this year. On the Hunger Games for vaccines, I was able to get I was able to get a vaccine through my doctor in Ottawa, AstraZeneca. It went very, very well. I think the Ottawa Public Health Unit is using doctors' offices more than the GTA public health units. I mean, it's a local decision whether to use how much they want to use doctors' offices. I did help my sister-in-law in Toronto, who's a type 1 diabetic in her 40s, get the vaccine she had to go up to Markham from downtown Toronto, but she got it at Costco pharmacy. I mean, I had to watch the Vax Hunters Canada web Twitter very carefully, and as soon as one came up, I was able to get it. The other thing to note, though, is basically I think the Hunger Games are going to be ending in Ottawa for the next month because we're not getting any AstraZeneca. The Pfizer trials about using them in pharmacies is only going to be in the Toronto area. We're on Ottawa, like there's basically no AstraZeneca left in Ottawa, and there won't be for a long time. So you're not going to hear a lot about Hunger Games in Ottawa. That's unfortunately ending, and then that we just don't have the
okay.
doses.
Okay. Well, I have to let you go, James. But we are going to have one of the Pharmacists Association coming on. I'm going to ask her about supply. It's one of the first things I want to ask her about when she joins me. But paid sick days. Thank you, James. Always a good call. Paid sick days, big news story in the last 24 hours. I mean, let's face it, after refusing to budge even an inch for these last many months on the issue of paid sick days, the Ford government relented yesterday And, let's listen to Monty McNaughton. He sounded like he's just back from a walk on the road to Damascus, for crying out loud.
Ontario workers now have access to the most generous sick pay program coast to coast. Through this bill, we are the only province in Canada to introduce paid sick days specific to COVID-19. If passed, all workers will soon have access to 3 paid sick days. This is more than the 1 day available to workers in Prince Edward Island and the 2 days available to workers in Quebec. This is a game changer, and this will save lives.
So paid sick days are coming, 3 of them, temporary expiry date to all of this, but it's done nothing to silence the critics. Vince. Good morning, Vince.
Good morning, Rob.
What do you think? 3 paid sick days, is that good enough?
Well, here's my view on it. I believe the 10-day would have been more appropriate.
Okay.
However, I think that if you're going to take 3 or more days, you should require a doctor's certificate or, doctor's note to say that you were sick.
Okay.
Because, these things are subject to abuse as well,
Sure.
So I would recommend that. And the other thing is, why make it, why make it temporary? Why not make it permanent? These are the kinds of issues that breed a desire to have unionized workplaces. I mean, if you don't give that stuff, there's other ways for people to get it. And eventually, this is the kind of stuff that happens, especially in larger workplaces. You want to push people towards unions? Just give a benefit that makes sense, and you don't have to push people towards unions.
Okay. Thank you, Vince.
Thank you.
Halftime, talk back hour, talking paid sick days, 3 of them. And they're temporary, expire September 25th. Your reaction, please, on The Rob Snow Show, Rogers TV, and City News.
There's always a
and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, April 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 13 degrees. And here's what's making news this hour. A correction this hour to the case count we gave you of COVID. The latest number of COVID cases in Ontario is 3,871. That's the number we gave you at 10. That is correct, as are the 41 more deaths. But the numbers locally are corrected this half hour. 147 cases in Ottawa, 16 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, 10 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. There are 12 new cases in Renfrew. More than 400 days into this pandemic, the Ford government will introduce legislation today for sick pay. The Premier promised it would be the best plan in North America. Reviews not exactly glowing. Much more on this subject coming up on the Rob Snow Show in the 11 o'clock hour. Transat AT says $310 million from a new federal loan will be used to provide reimbursements to travelers. The company has reached a deal with the feds to borrow up to $700 million. It's the same program that was used to help Air Canada. Transat has been in a tough spot during the economic crisis brought on by COVID-19, especially when flights to Mexico and the Caribbean were halted. City News Time, 10:31. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
3 paid sick days on offer from the Ford government. $200 a day in compensation paid to the employer by way of WSIB. The days don't need to be taken consecutively. People won't be asked for a note from the doctor. And in addition to that, the federal program, which just about everyone agrees is a poorly designed and totally inadequate program. Thank you, Mr. Trudeau, for another job well done. It will be topped up by the Ontario government, and workers hopefully will qualify for $1,000 a week instead of the original $500 a week. So what do you think of this plan? Is it good enough? Is it not good enough? Have your say. That's why we do the Talk Back Hour at 750-1310. Colin in Canada, good morning.
Good morning. So originally, when the first criticism started about sick days in Ontario and how we could prevent the spread by offering sick days, they criticized the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit because it was cumbersome. It was hard to apply for. It took 3 or 4 days for someone to get the money in. Okay? So they were calling for that to be fixed. So we fixed it. The provincial government has now put in 3 sick days that are going to be paid by the employer directly on their check, so no break at all for those 3 days. And then the employer can apply back to get that money, so the burden's not all on small business. On top of that, as you've just pointed out, Ontario's offered to double it to from $500 to $1,000 a week for a total of to 4 weeks. So that's 23 sick days that Ontarians right now, once this passes, can apply for if they feel they have COVID or if they feel they're too sick to go to work. So, if you want to have the argument about whether Ontario should just have mandatory sick days paid by all employers, we can have that debate. All right? We can have that debate to say that, we should have 2 days and we should have 10 days. Let's have that debate and let's put it on a ballot at election time and let the people decide. But to have the opposition and certain people in the medical community saying that we need permanent, forever sick days without consulting with the business community, without consulting with the people of Ontario, I think it's pretty presumptuous at this point, considering we're now the best in the country in the benefit that's being offered.
Okay, thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's move along here. One more. It's Bill, Toronto. Bill.
Good morning.
3 paid sick days, Bill. There used to be none. Critics say there should be 10. What do you think?
Well, you've got you're getting free paid sick days. You got the CERB, and the Liberals want to bring in the universal income. It sounds like we're just pretty much going to a communist state where everybody can stay at home.
Yeah, there's no signs of a universal basic income. That's not coming anytime soon by the sounds of it. I don't see that anywhere.
It's just like daycare, right? I mean, they've been promising.
Well, yeah, childcare. We'll see. As long as the provinces pick up half the tab, right? So.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm like a frog. I'm on a slow boil here. They keep doing this stuff incrementally, and before you know it, I'm going to be cooked.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Thank you. The question period just starting now. Let's listen to what's... leading the questioning today.
Horrifying tragedy that
Long-term
ensued
care.
as a result. The minister yesterday refused to take any responsibility whatsoever, and went on, in fact, in her press conference to blame everybody that she possibly could, including the Minister of Health. Speaker, the Minister of Long-Term Care has now had 24 hours to reflect on her response to the AG's report yesterday. My question would be, is it still her claim that neither she nor this government will take any responsibility or takes any responsibility for the tragedies that unfolded in our long-term care system with COVID-19?
Minister of Long-Term Care. Marilee Fullerton from the Canada
Thank you,
area.
Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the opportunity to clarify. As I said yesterday, and have said repeatedly, I take responsibility. I have a duty and an obligation to residents, their families and staff in long-term care. And I have been absolutely consistent with that messaging. So I don't know why that wasn't heard yesterday. I want to thank the Auditor General and her office for her special report on long-term care. And she was very clear and very insightful that it is the long-standing issues in staffing and the lack of new development and redevelopment of existing long-term care spaces that contributed to the spread of COVID-19. And I had a very long discussion with the Auditor General on Monday, which I appreciated very, very much. We will take extensive and ongoing measures to protect the health and safety and well-being of residents. The $4.9 billion that is going to create 27,000 new staff for long-term care on top of the 8,600 and more that we created during the first wave and into the second wave. We'll continue to take measures to shore up a sorely neglected sector.
Thank you. Supplementary question.
Well, Speaker, people who lost loved ones in long-term care don't believe for a minute that this Conservative government is going to fix our long-term care system, and they feel as abandoned as ever. They weren't surprised by the Auditor General's report at all, Speaker, but they were shocked by the response of the Minister of Long-Term Care. Fred Kramer, who lost his mother to COVID-19 in Orchard Villa, said this about the AG's report, and quoting, "No surprises in it. They're getting away with not looking after the people in the homes. Why are they getting away with it?" In reference to the government. Kathy Parks also lost her mother her father to COVID-19 in Orchard Villa. And Kathy says this, and I quote, "I see comments from the Minister of Long-Term Care about how the government is fixing this. They're not. They have no intention. It's heartbreaking. That's how people feel about this government's lack of action in long-term care. What does the minister, this premier, what does this government have to say to people like Kathy and people like Fred? The thousands of people who lost their loved ones.
Thank you. Minister of Long-Term Care.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for providing this opportunity to say what we have been doing and have been doing all along. Since the very beginning of our government being elected, we prioritized redevelopment in long-term care, 15,000 spaces, new spaces over 5 years, and 30,000 new spaces over 10, in addition to redeveloping homes that were languishing from the 1970s, all during the time that you were, in support of the previous government, in opposition, and I think that record should be recognized, the inaction of the previous government and the leader of the opposition. We've taken extensive measures, as I've said, on the staffing, on the redevelopment, on the building, on the IPAC, the 27,000 new hires positions that we are creating for long-term care to address our increasing incapacity. These are long-standing issues that we're addressing. Finally, it's our government, a conservative government, who's doing it. This is absolutely the facts.
There you go. That's Dr. Marilee Fullerton, the Canada area MPP, and she's the Minister of Long-Term Care, family physician as well, and she has been through it all, right, as the Minister of Long-Term Care during all the waves of this pandemic and now this report from the Auditor General. We had the Auditor General on the program a little bit earlier. Sick days is the other one, paid sick days when it comes to the Ford government and its policy. Lots of questions just begging for answers. And the big one, I think for a lot of people, is what took them so long. Why did they wait until the third wave? Why did they wait till the final few days of April to come up with this plan? It's not like the third wave snuck up on anyone. The calls have been out there for months, maybe as long as a year, for a sick day program that looks something like this. And, so that's one big question. Why now? What took so long? And you're hearing a lot of that today. And there are a lot of other questions that you can opine on as well. 3 days, better than none, right? But it isn't enough. The critics say it's not enough and it should be 10. That it should be more than 3 days, it should be 10. So what do you think of that? And it has an expiry date on it. The critics will say it should be permanent. So I think that's a summary of it. Sarah, on the paid sick day issue, what do you think about having 3 paid sick days in Ontario, Sarah?
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Well, I think it's necessary to have 10, and it should be permanent, especially since the COVID shots now be given annually. People get sick, sickness comes back. I don't think 3 days is a long enough time. I've had COVID before, and I was sick for a month, and having those, I was lucky enough to have my own paid sick days with work, but if I didn't have that, I would not be able to pay my bills. I would miss my rent. These things are essential for people. My friend who teaches early childhood education, she does not have paid sick days. She's working with germ-filled kids. She has gotten sick, and she can't take time off, and 3 days is just not enough.
Not enough, and it should be permanent, you think?
It should be permanent. People get sick. We're human beings. We're not working machines. We get sick, and 3 days is just not enough time for your body to get sick, be contagious, and heal. And now they want us to not go to work if we're sick. Well, 3 days is not enough time.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Good enough. Dave in the West End. Dave. Hello, Dave.
Hi, Rob.
Yes, Dave.
Hi, Rob.
3 paid sick days, Dave.
Well, sick days, Rob. Did you know years and years ago there was a doctor used to sit at the Ritz Hotel and sign certificates for your 3-day exemption?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, you charge a couple of bucks, and sometimes there was 5-6 guys in the line trying to get signed up. So this
you think there could be a racket soon enough in this?
Well, there used to be.
Right. Okay.
Now, Rob, the thing about Doug Ford, Andrea Horvath has all she does is complain. So they should disband the NDP and become liberals.
What? You're the opposition? You're supposed to complain if you're the opposition, aren't you?
You're supposed to come up with good suggestions and help the country get over this thing. But if you listen to your last 10 or 12 days of programming, the confusion to get this needle
is
overwhelming.
Yeah.
And
a lot of frustration,
Yes.
Yeah.
And had we had the supply like we should have from Trudeau, all of this would have been non-existent. Like the sick leave days and so on only came up because of the confusion over the needle and people not getting
and the
vaccinated.
lack of reliable supply on the vaccines.
No supply.
Yeah. Okay, Dave, thank you. Yeah, they're on to this should be pretty good, actually. They're on to paid sick days now in the legislature.
Government never listens to the science table. Why should they now, I guess? And here's what they say about this government's failure in their announcement yesterday. That the scheme is arbitrary, stingy, and in the end, foolish. Doctors warn, of course, that it's too few days, that there's too little pay, and that it might actually impact workers to put them in an even worse off position than before this scheme is put into place. At a time when the Premier has just taken 10 paid days off to appropriately quarantine, as the experts advise us to do, why do they think that workers don't deserve the same thing, to be able to quarantine completely and not have to make a decision between going back to work sick or paying the bills? Why do they only get 3 when the Premier gets 10?
Mr. Labour.
Monty
Mr.
McNaughton.
Speaker, we are going to be bringing forward legislation this afternoon to bring in the most comprehensive plan in the entire country. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we are the very first province in Canada to bring forward paid sick days during COVID-19. In fact, Mr. Speaker, British Columbia's NDP government has refused to bring in paid sick days. Wow. But Mr. Speaker, let me discuss some of the plans that's going to be in the legislation this afternoon. We have agreed to ensure that we're topping up the federal program. We want to make that federal program $1,000 per week for 4 weeks. We're the first province in the country to do that. Mr. Speaker, we are going to bring in, if approved by this House, 3 paid sick days. That's going to be flexible, open, no sick notes required to ensure that workers in this province, for example, will be paid to get vaccinated. My question to the Leader of the Opposition is she going to support us to bring in paid sick days for workers in Ontario?
She was asked that yesterday, by the way. Andrea Horvath was asked that yesterday, by the way. She wouldn't answer the question. So it's 10:46. We'll be right back. Final quarter of the Rob Snow Show. Talk Back Hour on City News.
I wanted to give gifts to my volunteers, so I started making, I knew this is a skill I had, so I made a chocolate that had culture, a cultural based with a teaching, because culture here is not just a little part, it's the large part, it's the fundamental part of our organization. So then we started doing, just little programs, and we sell a few at a fair. And then we started getting contracts. People were starting to enjoy the chocolates, and started getting more and more contracts all across Canada. Then we decided to become a social enterprise, and we were able to create 2 jobs. And Val is one of our chocolatiers, very talented. We were able to help her with employment.
We started just with a little bit in the kitchen, doing a little bit of chocolate together, and next thing it's just kind of taken off. And it's great because I love to be creative, and we get to create a lot and make up stuff, and it's just I just love it. It's just great that we get to make money back for Wabano, and it's helping me out, and we're helping just everybody out, Wabano and everything.
We met a very socially conscious business owner being around town, and we decided to partner, because beans and chocolate, coffee and chocolate are sort of created the same way, and there's and they're very one origin bean, so it was a good pairing together. And it's been a fantastic partnership for both of us.
I was fortunate enough to get introduced to Purat, the head of Wabano Fine Chocolates, through a local networking group. And I was completely intrigued by the social enterprise that she was running, and then I looked at what we were doing, trying to support local business and supporting local communities, and it was a perfect match, and it's been fantastic ever since.
We make every batch by hand. We temper it by hand to get to the consistency it needs to be to make a good chocolate. And one of the best, also wonderful things we did, we've connected with Ed, with being around town, and our coffee bars have been an amazing hit. So we're really excited about the connection with our coffee.
Time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
It is deeply mystifying sometimes how the Ford government has handled this sick day issue. It drew this line in the sand. It tried time and again to throw it back at the Liberals. Didn't make a lot of headway there, despite their best efforts. And all the while, they've watched their comfortable lead in the polls evaporate. And the big problem is now they've allowed the caricature of Doug Ford to reemerge. Doug Ford, the big meanie. Doug Ford, the cold-hearted, tight-fisted, callous conservative Doug Ford, who says, he cares about the little guy, but he really doesn't care about working people at all. That's back, and now it's more effective than ever. And the Doug Ford who goes and picks up PPE in his own truck, nobody's going to remember that come election time. The cost of the Ford government's obstinance on this will be seen in the election. I would make the prediction that there are ridings in the Ottawa area that are PC ridings right now that will not be PC ridings after the next election. Blue MPPs are going to be out of work after the dust settles on all of this. Over 3 paid sick days. At a time when governments at all levels, they can't spend money fast enough. But the problem is it's government and it can't focus for 5 minutes on the right and proper way to allocate what are, in the end, finite resources. I don't know, just politically here. When it comes to the paid sick day thing, I watched what the Ford government has done here in the month of April. And I'm seeing a master class in how to not do something. If the government had done this back in the winter, late last year, it would probably still be enjoying a double-digit lead in the polls. Instead, re-election very much up in the air. It's astonishing that so many so-called clever people can be so tone deaf. Tone deaf. And the pandemic continues, and the third wave rages on, and another 30, how many cases today? 3,800 cases today. 3 paid sick days. 3 paid sick days. 3 paid sick days. I also find it remarkable that the people running the city of Toronto are trying to do a victory lap and give themselves a pat on the back, as though it's a job well done because they've scored this partnership with Vaccine Hunters, the volunteer-led Twitter account. Isn't that more of an admission of failure for the city of Toronto? That the biggest city in the country has to partner with a volunteer-led Twitter account? Do you know the size of the annual operating budget for the city of Toronto is $12 billion? Do you know how many people work for the city of Toronto? 40,000 people work for the city of Toronto? And it can't come up with its own booking system for its own city facilities? For vaccine doses? It has to partner with a Twitter account run by volunteers. Is that really something to cheer about? Or is that an admission that maybe something's not quite right when it comes to the public administration of the biggest city in the country? Dealing with a terrible third wave of the pandemic. Quote, the city of Toronto is partnering with the volunteers behind the Twitter account Vaccine Hunters Canada to help residents find appointments at city-run clinics. Imagine that. The city government, biggest city government in Canada, with all of those resources, that multi-billion-dollar budget, those tens of thousands of employees, and it can't manage to do that itself, and instead it turns to a Twitter account for help. Quote, Mayor John Tory, speaking with reporters, says he's not embarrassed the city has turned to the volunteer group for help or that it's indicative of a larger communications problem. This is a good news story, he said. Our mandate is to use every single channel, every single resource, every volunteer, every set of legs, eyes, ears, and brains. And brains. To get as many people vaccinated as quickly as possible, make it easy as possible. The partnership with Vaccine Hunters is the first partnership of its kind in Canada, the city said in a statement. I mean, it makes you wonder. I don't know. It makes me wonder. Maybe it doesn't make you wonder at all. You have 40,000 people on the payroll. How many of those people have IT experience? How many have experience booking everything from, say, an hour of City of Toronto ice time to an hour to have a fitness class run by the City of Toronto, or to have your child attend a day camp run by the City of Toronto? And yet, when it comes to the greatest health crisis of our lives, Canada's largest city can't manage it. Can't manage it. And has to partner with a Twitter account started by some savvy volunteers. Now, maybe it sounds like I'm picking on Toronto. Fair enough. It's kind of a hobby of mine. Maybe Toronto's not alone. You could say it about a lot of municipalities. Maybe it's not a lot better here in Ottawa. I was just struck by that yesterday. A whole level of government. All those people making all that money. And Toronto even has what no other Ontario city has. Toronto has its own taxing power. They could bring in their own made-in-Toronto taxes, for crying out loud. But it can't manage to run a booking site for its own city facilities for vaccine doses. $12 billion a year is the budget for the City of Toronto. Its capital budget is $30 billion a year. But it can't build an online tool to book reservations for a dose of vaccine. That's the Talkback Hour for today. Tomorrow, it's the Friday Free-for-All tomorrow. That's our favorite one of the week when it comes to the Talkback Hour, because we don't pick the topics, you pick the topics. We don't do the heavy lifting. We leave that up to you, and we just kind of throw open the phone lines, and it is always an adventure. Coming up right after the 11 o'clock news, more on the vaccination scavenger hunt from Sandra Hanna, the CEO of the Neighbourhood Pharmacists Association of Canada. This is City News.
WW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, April 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 13 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Latest number of COVID cases in Ontario, 3,871. Also 41 more deaths reported in the province. 147 of the new cases are in Ottawa. 16 are in Eastern Ontario's health unit. 10 are in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. There are 12 new cases in Renfrew County. The cases come from just under 57,000 tests performed. The positivity rate is dropping a bit, though, now at 7.6%. After releasing a report into long-term care homes amid this pandemic, Ontario's Auditor General says the government did not properly prepare for that sector for something like COVID-19. Bonnie Lysyk explains recommendations for long-term care homes were made after SARS outbreak. That was in 2003, but they were not implemented fully, leaving some without a pandemic plan. She tells the Rob Snow Show municipal care homes were also offering a higher level of care pre-pandemic compared to the for-profit homes.
The for-profit sector is the sector that has more of the housing of 3 or 4 people in a room. And so consequentially, they would have been impacted. They had higher numbers that you could attribute to some of the difficulties in moving people.
Now, Lysyk adds there is a disconnect between long-term care and the healthcare system since they were not fully integrated. City News Time, 11:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls today, generally just a lot of cloud. We get into that steadier rain for the evening. 18 the high today, more rain overnight, 9 for the low, and tomorrow periods of rain, high about 11 with a gusty wind. For today, the high 18.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 13 degrees. Federal Conservatives are demanding the government speed up Canada's vaccination timeline. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole believes the Trudeau government has failed in its vaccination efforts. And in an Opposition Day motion put forward in the House of Commons, the party's demanding the Fed secure enough supply to bump up its target for getting Canadians their first dose.
To ensure that every Canadian adult has access to a vaccine by the May long weekend.
Currently, the federal target is for the end of June, but an inaccuracy in the motion itself is also taking some of the spotlight today. It claims the federal government changed the dosing interval for vaccines to 4 months, when in fact it was the Independent National Advisory Committee on Immunization, which provides advice to the provinces, who then make the final call. Meanwhile, we're waiting for a vaccine update from the feds later today, and the government has been teasing some good news around Moderna deliveries. Just this morning, the drug maker announced it is boosting its production of vaccines to make up to 1 billion this year and up to 3 billion shots next year. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 11:03. Port of Montreal, which we rely on for a lot of goods, now has legislation from the feds getting the striking dock workers back on the job. The Labour Minister, Philomena Tassi, says the legislation was a last resort, but it did pass the House of Commons late last night. In fact, early this morning around 2 o'clock. Now the Senate still has to deal with that bill. That happens tomorrow. Transat AT says $310 million from the new federal loan it is qualified for will be used to reimburse you, the traveler. The company reached a deal with the feds to borrow up to $700 million through the same program that was used to help Air Canada. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
So we've been calling it call, click, and wait. Call, click, and wait. Hope, pray, call, click, and wait. To try and get a shot, the vaccine scavenger hunt, the search for the shot. For the last few days, listeners have been sharing their experiences in trying to get a first dose of vaccine, callbacks, and over the last few days, it's been story after story of frustration and the need for an awful lot of patience, an awful lot of legwork. So let's get an update on what it's like to be on the other side of the computer, the other side of the telephone, the other side of the counter at the local pharmacy. Sandra Hanna joins me this morning, a CEO, Neighbourhood Pharmacists Association of Canada. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure. What would you hear? What are you hearing from your member pharmacies about the situation right now, say, with demand for vaccines?
Yeah, I think that the biggest story right now is that demand is far outpacing supply. And that's been the challenge in every single channel for the vaccine distribution and administration. And that's no different for pharmacies. There are 4,600 pharmacies across the province. Right now, just under 1,000 of them, or about 1,000 of them, are currently administering vaccines. That's as of last week. And the reason that it's, just 1,000 out of all the pharmacies across the province who are willing and ready to step up to administer vaccines is because we just don't have enough vaccine to supply all of the pharmacies. So we're rolling this out slowly. Pharmacies across Ontario have the capacity to administer up to 1 million vaccine doses a week, and we just don't have that supply right now. In total, over the past 6 weeks, we've received about 500,000 vaccines over the whole 6-week period between all pharmacies participating. So just to put into perspective that, it really is a balancing act right now for pharmacies, managing, crazy amounts of demand, phones ringing off the hook, certainly long wait lists, people's, booking online. So their appointments are all booked up, and they have to work with the limited supply that they're being allocated and provided. And right now, pharmacies are just being provided the AstraZeneca vaccine, but we expect.
Could they accommodate the other vaccines? Sandra?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's we know that there's going to be a limited pilot that's rolling out imminently for pharmacists to supply and administer the Pfizer vaccine, and that's actually going to be, I think, a great opportunity for pharmacies because that is the vaccine that we are seeing the most stable and secure supply of, and I think it's going to really open up a whole other avenue for pharmacies to be able to play a bigger and more expanded role in getting more shots in arms.
Okay, I want to get a sense about what's going on in the pharmacy and what it's like to try and schedule appointments, put people on wait lists, go through wait lists, call people back, book appointments. Can you give us a sense of what this is like for the neighborhood pharmacists right now, Sandra? What they're going through, try and navigate all of this and accommodate everybody? Yeah.
And thanks for trying to shed light on this because I think it's we think that we are going onto a booking portal and booking an appointment for an unlimited amount of appointments or vaccines, but in reality, pharmacies are receiving vaccines in shipments of 100, 200 doses, and they're only they're getting those shipments, not really knowing when their next shipment is coming in, sometimes not knowing when that shipment is coming in until the day before. So it's really difficult for pharmacies to sometimes book these appointments, and many times they're waiting until they receive confirmation of incoming supply before they open up their booking systems. And so that's really challenging for pharmacies on the front line, and totally appreciate that it's challenging and frustrating for the public who are trying to book these appointments and secure a vaccine. But because of the instability of the supply, it's been a real challenge for pharmacies because the last thing we want is to be booking all these appointments, not receiving the supply, having to rebook appointments, cancel appointments. So it is a balancing act on the front lines that pharmacies are having to manage, booking those appointments based on the number of vaccine doses and the timing of when they expect to receive those vaccine doses. And the additional component to that is that because of the challenge with booking, we're seeing a lot of the public booking several appointments at several different locations, putting themselves on several different wait lists. And so when we get to actually getting through those appointments, there are several cancellations, no-shows. And so pharmacies are left with vaccine that once that vial is punctured, you actually have a certain number of hours to use the vaccine.
It has to be used that day, right? It'll have to be used that day, you would think.
You got it. It depends depends on the vaccine. Some have slightly longer times than others, but but yeah, you have a clicking time, right? So I think that's also one of the things that, you know, some people are talking about. Well, how come I was on a wait list and somebody walked into the pharmacy? And it may just be that somebody walked into a pharmacy in that final hour where there were no shows. And, you know, certainly as a collective, as a population, the public does not want to be wasting vaccines. So it is a really delicate balancing act on the front lines between appointments, trying to call people in order, and just making sure we're not wasting a single dose of this vaccine that is in such high demand.
Okay. I'm going to play you a clip here. This is Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson expressing his frustration just yesterday about and basically pleading with people, don't put yourself on 15 or 18 wait lists at pharmacies. Let's listen here.
If I could plead with members of the public, please do not go out and register 5, 10, 15 times with different pharmacies. It's clogging up the system. The system, a lot of people find, is very frustrating at this point because there are different ways based on the different pharmacies how you get registered and whether you get notified in a wait list or so on. But far too many people are reporting back to me that they have individual friends who are booking one case in Manotick, 18 different pharmacies.
How common is that? Are you hearing that from your members?
Yeah, we are. We're hearing it from a lot, and it is a challenge. And you know, it's an understandable thing to do when you don't know when you're going to get called, and you're hoping that you're just going to, you know, get the first call that you receive and get that vaccine faster. However, it is challenging, because if you can imagine that, you know, you have a clicking time bomb, you want to make sure that you get that vaccine in an arm before it gets wasted, and you're calling people on your wait list, and half of them have said, oh, I've already gotten my vaccine. And that's after, you know, a number of people who may have booked appointments at several places, because we're seeing that as well, and just not showing up. And when you call them, it's because they've gotten an appointment at another place. And again, this is all totally understandable because of the frustration with getting the vaccine these days. However, it is presenting challenges on the front lines. The one thing I would say is that we are seeing now, and you know, in Ontario, they've initially said that it was primarily all bookings, and we are seeing a lot more walk-in opportunities available. So I think there is an opportunity for pharmacies, and most pharmacies are now enabling both appointments and walk-in. So, you know, I'd say rather than putting yourself on, you know, multiple wait lists, I think call the pharmacy, see if they are offering walk-in opportunities, and that might be an opportunity as well for people to access the vaccine.
Okay. What is the current situation with the supply of AstraZeneca vaccine?
Well, that is a question that I don't have an answer to, Rob. I wish I did. Right. I think, you know, there have been a lot of challenges with the Moderna vaccine.
But I mean, is it running out? Are we running out? That's what people want to know. Are we going to run out, I guess? Yeah.
Well, I think it depends on when the next shipment comes in, and that's something that is being coordinated between the federal and provincial governments. So we don't really have a line of sight as to when the next shipment is coming in. You know, at the moment, we still have some vaccines in store with the AstraZeneca, but as I said, you know, we as an association have been pushing towards enabling pharmacies to have access to all the vaccines, so that if there is a challenge in supply with a particular vaccine, that doesn't eliminate the opportunity for those ready and able providers to be able to get those shots in arms, and it doesn't shut down that channel of immunizers. So as I said, we are going to be running a limited pilot over the next few weeks. Okay. With the Pfizer vaccine in pharmacy to really, it's a proof of concept, because we've done this in other provinces, and we have our best practices, we know what we need to do. So it's really a proof of concept, and then we hope that that'll then expand further to other pharmacies, so that, you know, if there is a challenge with AstraZeneca supply, well, we've got Pfizer, and that one we know we have much more stable supply of over the coming months.
Okay, I want to circle back to something you said earlier in our conversation. Your member pharmacies, you estimate, could do 1 million doses a week, you said, right?
Correct.
If you had the supply, you could do 1 million doses a week, which is about 140,000 doses a day.
Yep.
Okay, so for the last full 24-hour period that we have data for from the Ontario government is about 116,000 doses.
Yeah.
So there is room. There's capacity to deliver the shots, but there are supply constraints.
Correct.
Clear.
And that 1 million is just through the pharmacy channel.
Just through the pharmacy channel. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That doesn't speak to the other providers, and we know there's capacity there too, but we've got great capacity just within the pharmacy channel. But as you said, as a province, we were administering, and we're doing great as a province in terms of the vaccine supply we have. We've got lots of capacity. We just don't have the supply at this point. So we're ramping up, and as more supply becomes available, we've got providers, we've got channels ready to turn on and administer them and get them into arms as soon as we have the vaccine in province.
Okay. I thank you for your time this morning and the latest information from your member pharmacists. It's a great pleasure, and tell them to keep up the great work, okay? Thank you. We know that it's a very busy time for them.
Thanks.
Sandra Hanna, CEO, Neighbourhood Pharmacists Association of Canada. Are you going to be able to play golf this weekend? Lots of rumors. Nothing yet from the government, though. They'd like to throw Ontarians a bone and open up a few more things like tennis and golf courses. Lots of rumors, but nothing yet. Adam Stanley writes about golf for the Canadian Press. He's the host of the Next Rounds on Me podcast, and he'll join me next here on City News.
The Rob Snow.
So the birth of absinthe was 2002, I think, 2003, and I was working at Urban Bistro, happily, where Allium is now. And then the space where Holland Cafe was came up. It's on the corner of Spencer and Holland. And I spoke to the landlord, and there's a lot of interest from a lot of other people, but he and I just, got along super well, and he put a lot of faith in me. So Carmen Turner is his name. He gave me the lease to the place and really pretty much gave me all the equipment in the place. So I was really lucky. I've been really lucky with landlords that way, actually, both my current landlord and Carmen Turner. Because if there hadn't been Carmen Turner, there wouldn't have been Absinthe. So we were there for a few years and just sort of outgrew the place. And then now we're here. It's obviously been tough, and it's been tough for everyone. I mean, that's the, been the big democratic sweep of, like, in restaurants and the hospitality and the arts that we were talking about earlier. It's like everybody's been impacted pretty much the same. From everybody that I talked to, we're down 80%. We're climbing out now. I think one of the saddest things is like everybody, we went down to 2 employees from 25, and we're now at 4, and we're bringing 2 new people on this week, so we'll be at 6. So it's little steps. So it's been tough. It's I've got the most expensive clubhouse ever here, because some days you come and you don't do any business, but you're here. But I'm grateful for what I do have. I think everybody's optimistic now, not necessarily just about the vaccine, but about like the vaccine, spring, being able to be outside. I think you're going to see a lot of like pop-up things happen in parking lots and on sidewalks and like that, rather than being actually inside somebody's commerce. I think we'd like to take it outside. I know my staff would. My staff like the outdoors now, all of a sudden, all 4 of us. 6 soon. But we'll be doing some business in the patio in the parking lot, and we have a patio out front. And I think I hope other restaurants and stores will do the same. I hope that they take advantage of like the sidewalk and doing sort of, guerrilla marketing and stuff like that, and really shaking it up a bit. You can find us at Absinthe Cafe at 1208 Wellington Street West in Hintonburg, and you can find us online at absinthecafe.ca.
Opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So there is some breaking news right now. This is the Minister of National Defense. This is Harjit Sajjan.
Conduct Response Center across the country, as noted in Budget 2021. This program will include both online and in-person group support, as well as an app that will connect members to confidential peer support 24/7 anywhere across the globe. It will be designed and facilitated by professionals, clinicians, and people with lived experience, ensuring the best support is available. This funding
the news
also
that has come out of this already, this started about 5-10 minutes ago from the Minister of National Defense. It's all about sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces, at the allegations at some of the highest levels. And the defense minister has apologized to victims of military sexual misconduct who, quote, feel we were not there for them, And he has announced an independent external comprehensive review into harassment, sexual misconduct in DND and the Canadian Forces, and it will be led by former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour. So that is breaking right now, and we'll have more during our 11:30 newscast. This is City News, and this is the Rob Snow Show. Now, as you know, the golf industry shut down in the province of Ontario. It was part of the latest lockdown measures imposed by the Ford government. In a recent conversation that I had with Ontario Golf, the estimate is that 100,000 people are employed in the golf industry. It's not just golf courses. It's the entire industry. It's golf instruction. It's tourism related to golf. 100,000 people employed in the industry, and it's a $3 billion industry in Ontario, and it's closed. But could it be open again? Could it be open as soon as this weekend? Lots of rumors to that effect, but nothing firm from anyone in the Ford government. Adam Stanley writes about golf for the Canadian Press, and he is the host of the Next Rounds on Me podcast. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, Adam. Thank you again for the time. What are you hearing? What do you know? Are people going to be playing golf this weekend?
You know, I'm probably leaning towards saying that they aren't going to be playing golf this weekend, and for a couple of reasons. I think most of the smoke that came this week on social media was certainly stemmed from the golf industry and golf course facilities themselves, and with reason. I mean, they don't want to be absolutely crunched by the tidal wave of people that want to book tee times as soon as the Ford government says, yes, go ahead, we can have golf back in this province. So one course starts to open up their tee sheet, then another course does it, a private one, a public one, et cetera, and the next thing you know, they're all saying, hey, everyone's opened their tee sheets for this weekend. We're going to go play golf or what? But again, this is now a politics thing. It's not so much a golf industry thing, and for me, as somebody who covers golf for a living, I have never been on more political hashtag threads or OPT mailing lists in my life. So at least as it stands right now, you know, we as in the golf industry as a collective are still waiting for the people who actually make these decisions. Those are the politicians to say, yes, you can go ahead, despite the fact that, you know, the science is on the side of the golf industry, the economics, as you had mentioned a few minutes ago, and just kind of the tugging at the heartstrings as well. You know, there's take the 15, 16-year-old who's trying to save up for college or his first car or whatever it may be, and, you know, they can't work right now either.
Now, what do you make of the golf course that opened in Tillsonburg? Do you think that's a one-off? Is that course planning to do that again this weekend? What do you know about that particular course, Adam?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you know, Tillsonburg, the bridge is at Tillsonburg. It's about 2 hours southwest of Toronto. They opened last weekend, defied the order, and they've basically been sold out ever since. You can't get a tee time there. Certainly as of just yesterday, I looked online. They were fully booked from Thursday all the way through until Sunday. That was was the last day that was appearing on their online booking portal. So from what I understand, I spoke with the golf course a couple days ago. They, as a facility, did not get fined. A golfer sent me a direct message on Twitter. He played on Sunday last week. He said he did not get fined, nor did the golfers on Saturday. So to your question specifically, is it a one-off? Yes, it's the only golf course, from what we understand, to have defied the order and opened. However, they have not been, I guess the word would be, punished by the OPP as it stands right now.
Okay. Is that a private course? Is it a municipal course? What do you know about it?
It's a public golf course. Yeah,
Public
so it's
golf
not
course.
private. Yeah, public course. So people, who, no matter who you are, you can go online and book a tee time and
pay your green fee and you're off. Away you go. Yeah. Okay. Yep. All right. Okay. And really no enforcement, right?
No, there was one OPP SUV there on Saturday, the first day, observing. That was the quote that they gave the local news station out there. Sunday, the golfer who played on Sunday, when he sent me that message, told me that he did not even see a police officer. The worst part about his day, he told me, was that he made a double bogey on the first hole as he was slightly nervous. But otherwise, no, he just said it was good to get out and play again.
Okay. I have to ask you while I have you on the line, Brooke Henderson wins again. 10th win on the LPGA Tour. Put that into some kind of perspective for this 23-year-old phenom from Smiths Falls and what that means for Canadian golf. Adam.
Certainly from a Canadian athlete perspective, I would say she's probably the most underrated, despite the fact that she is already Canada's best golfer of all time as it relates to victories. If, listeners are like, well, I don't even know who she is. I mean, that's tough to hear, but in the context of greatness in this sport, in this country's history, the previous maximum wins by a golfer, PGA Tour, men's side, or LPGA Tour, was 8. And Brooke is now at 10. And like you said, she's 23 years old. So in the context of individual success in a sport in this country, the 23-year-old from Smiths Falls is better than every single other person in the history of the game from Canada who has ever teed it up at a pro event, which is pretty significant.
Where is she ranked on that tour? Is she like top 5, or do you know her ranking? Or
5th in the world, just as of her victory last weekend. So she's 5th in the world.
5th in the world. 5th in the world. Wow. Incredible. Incredible. Adam Stanley, I know you have your ear to the ground when it comes to the great game of golf in this country, and I thank you so much for taking the time for us this morning.
No worries. Hopefully we'll talk again soon, and I'll have some good news the next time we chat.
His podcast is called Next Rounds on Me, and he writes about golf for the Canadian Press. That's Adam Stanley. Coming up, more on paid sick days in Ontario, both sides of the issue. Rocco Rossi is the CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. He'll join me, as will Doris Grinspun, the CEO of the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, the 29th of April. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buck, and right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, we got mostly cloudy skies and 14 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. Provincial health officials reporting 147 new cases of COVID-19 in Ottawa. Out of 3,871 new cases across Ontario, 41 more people in this province have died due to novel coronavirus. Elsewhere locally, Leeds Grenville Lanark Health Unit reports 13 new cases of COVID-19, 7 of those cases in the past 24 hours. The province is reporting 16 new cases in Eastern Ontario and a dozen new cases in Renfrew County. Today's numbers out of nearly 57,000 tests. Quebec is reporting 1,042 new cases of COVID-19 today and 10 more deaths attributed to the virus, 3 of those deaths in the last 24 hours. There are 55 new cases of COVID-19 in the Outaouais. Quebec health officials report hospitalizations have dropped, but the number of patients in intensive care has gone up slightly. The federal Liberal government tapping former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour to lead what it says is an independent review of the military's handling of sexual assault, harassment, and other misconduct. Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan announced Arbour's appointment today, nearly 3 months after the government and the Canadian Armed Forces were rocked by allegations of inappropriate sexual behavior by the military's top commander. Arbour will not be looking at individual cases, a number of which are currently under active military police investigation. Meantime, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is facing opposition calls to allow his chief of staff to testify at a parliamentary committee looking into sexual misconduct in the military. Questions have emerged about what Katie Telford knew about a complaint involving former Defence Chief General Jonathan Vance. I'm Sarah Buchan for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Let's get more reaction to the announcement from the Ford government today. Legislation to be introduced this afternoon on 3 paid sick days. 3 paid sick days. Temporary. The program would expire September 25th, and it's not the 10 paid sick days that have been called for by many critics of the Ford government. Rocco Rossi is here now from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Good morning, Mr. Rossi.
Hey, Robin, it's Rocco. Mr. Rossi's my dad.
Oh, I'm sorry about that, sir. Yeah.
No worries.
Yep. What do you think about the announcement yesterday from Mr. Ford?
Well, I think what's important, people are focusing on the 3 days, but what's also on the table is effectively a doubling of the benefit of the federal program from $500 a week to $1,000 a week, and that's for several weeks, so well beyond the 10 days. All good programs need 2 things. They need the money, and then they need the mechanism. And the money is now there. I mean, the feds had originally had notionally put $5 billion for the sickness benefit program, and very little pickup because it is a difficult application process that happens after the fact, doesn't, make it seamless for the employee, and was set at $500 a week, which is barely above minimum wage. So it left a lot of employees making the bad decision in the decision between doing the right thing for public health and putting food on the table for their families. So the 3 days is really to help in the bridge, but we need to have both levels of government at the table to fix the longer term piece in order to ensure that we get this right and we take away that horrible choice that many employees are being put in, and that is helping to fuel, and it's certainly one of the sources of the spread that we're seeing across the country.
So what then are some of the missing pieces? What are the missing pieces?
Well, one, it can't be an application process whose onus is on the employee after the fact. You want to have it seamless.
Okay.
I mean, one of the virtues of what what the Ford government's 3 days is. Look, the businesses will pay for the 3 days up to $200 a day based on the salary and wages of the individual employee. And then the company is going to be reimbursed. One of the things we want to be sure is that is speedy, because some of the programs and grant programs that the government is currently managing is not being reimbursed as quickly as our members and businesses would like. But two is bridging very quickly into the combination of the province and the federal funds, so that this isn't just a 3-day program, but really will cover people seamlessly if they have to self-isolate because they test positive, or they have to be home because someone else in their family has tested positive. And so there isn't any temptation to continue to go to work and potentially to spread this virus further.
One of the worries that I have is when it comes to speed, expedience. This is, Mr. Rossi, Rocco, you know, this is not the reputation of WSIB, that it works in any kind of speedy fashion on behalf of either workers or employers injured on the job. This is not the reputation that it has.
What we've seen, to be fair to all levels of government, because they've understood from the beginning of this process that the traditional ways of developing policy and passing legislation is kind of out the window. COVID is moving at a speed that has just said, look, you've got to be prepared to put your best idea forward and then to iterate based on, are you delivering or not? Is it solving the problem or not? And so you saw that multiple times. The wage subsidy program started at 10%, was not moving the dial, got moved to 75%. The rent subsidy program, initially offloading basically the management of this to landlords, totally inappropriate, and clearly wasn't getting pickup, resisted change for months, finally got changed to one where it's tenant initiated, which is absolutely the right place for it to be. So there are solutions available. A far easier one, given that employers have to send employee remittances back to the government, to the CRA, to both the provincial and the federal government for various things, why not simply allow them to subtract whatever the sick day is from that before sending the sending the remittances? There are other things that could be made faster, but the key is you've now put the money on the table, both the feds and the province. Congratulate them for it. But now let's get the mechanism that will actually make this fast, that will actually help to solve the problem that we're trying to solve for.
What I know your members are placated somewhat that they will eventually be made whole as a result of this through the $200 a day, again, from the WSIB. But how precarious a position are your members in? How problematic would it have been had they had to pay, say, out of pocket right off the payroll for this without being made whole?
Yeah. I mean, this is something we've been clear from the beginning. We've called for paid sick days for the crisis, but that it had to be linked to the crisis, and two, that it be government paid, because we've already seen tens of thousands of businesses in Ontario alone go bankrupt. Thousands more are hanging on by their fingernails. You know, I've had this discussion with a number of people say, well, you know, businesses should pay because Amazon is making a gajillion dollars. Well, I have 60,000 members in the province of Ontario, and 59,999 of them are not Amazon. So you can't do a one-size-fits-all and look at the means test is taxation at the end of the year. Those who are going to make more are going to pay more. For right now, in the crisis, let's make it simple. It has to be government paid. I applaud that decision on the part of the government. And this isn't simply an ideological thing. It is a math thing, because it is interesting to note that British Columbia, which has an NDP majority government, has not mandated employer-paid sick days because it understands the math that not all businesses are created equal, not all have the same margins, and so you can't just holus bolus add costs and expect that they're just going to be able to suck it up.
Okay. What do you think about the expiry date? Some are calling for this to be a permanent program.
Again, I don't think you talk about permanent programs in the middle of a crisis. You deal with the crisis, and then you have the conversation around what are priorities going forward. Clearly, as everyone of all political stripes has said, extraordinary times require extraordinary measures. No debate that we are in extraordinary times where getting this right has massive societal consequences, which we're living through. So let's take care of it now. If that September 25th has to be October 25th because of pace of vaccination, et cetera, I'm sure we can deal with that. But permanent is totally inappropriate at this stage.
I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Stay positive, test negative, and get vaccinated just as soon as you can.
That's great advice. Rocco Rossi, Ontario Chamber of Commerce. It's 11:42, and the developing story right now is that the Trudeau government is going to tap Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour, former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour, to lead what it describes as an independent review of the military's handling of sexual assault, harassment, and other misconduct. This was announced earlier, just probably within the last 25 minutes or so, by the Defense Minister, Harjit Sajjan, and there is a news conference happening right now.
Programs, uniforms, recruiting, all the elements that go into making a member of the Canadian Armed Forces or a member of the Department of National Defense, and why abuse of authority continues to affect the institution this profoundly.
Follow-up, question suivie.
Yes, thank you. If I'm a victim who has suffered abuse in the military, why would I trust the sincerity of the words that you're speaking today when you note that the record is one of inaction?
And that is a very good point. Announcements don't make change. Our actions do. And this is what we are committed to doing. We have heard, as I stated, from survivors, we have spoken to many of the experts. It's what we put into place, the actions that we take, and the system that's going to be put into place will be determined by our survivors that come forward, a system that they can trust. But one thing for all the Canadian Armed Forces members and our survivors who are listening, you have an entire leadership, you have a government, and the leadership of the Department of National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces who are absolutely committed to this. As we stated, we will, all options are on the table. We will not leave any stone unturned, because at the end of the day, making sure that we have an inclusive environment that it, allows everybody to reach their full potential is the ultimate goal. We cannot rest until we have zero tolerance absolutely achieved. And in the actions of the past and what they have seen, we regret that we did not have a system in place that supports them. But we are absolutely committed to doing this. And the work that you will see now is how we're going to build on those actions and regain that trust.
Okay, let's leave that. It's 11:45. That's a developing story, and we'll have more on it at noon during our noon newscast. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob.
Well, we all loved our rock T-shirts growing up, right? It was our badge. Hey, we went to this concert. We knew that band inside out. So we kept doing that and kept promoting that. What's sort of happening now is that audience is dying. I always say the earth is flat. So the 60s rockers are falling off the end of the earth. So you don't see as big a sales anymore because my audience is disappearing. What's sort of helping, to promote that history is the kids are buying vinyl. And luckily we have a vinyl shop in the neighborhood here, record center. So what's happening is I've seen kids come in with their dad. And the dad saying, hey, do you have any Beatles shirts? Do you have any CBGB? Do you have any of this? I said, well, why? He said, well, because my daughter's into it. She's wearing my T-shirt. So slowly it's coming back, right? The kids are, I think, getting fed up with the generic music that's out there. And they want to click into something that, first of all, links them to their parents, something that they thoroughly enjoy now, and maybe they're passing it on to their grandkids. Pandemic has been a couple of things, definitely hard on everybody. So much messaging that's out there that people don't understand, stats that every day, Jesus Murphy, like I'm getting a headache just reading this stuff, right? So really it was just trying to understand where we were going to go from there. The city of Ottawa all of a sudden said, everybody's got to wear a mask. You got to wear it on the bus. People were scrambling, okay? And I had, the store next door had really big windows, so I just flooded the window with masks. Well, that was the activity that saved the business. People were coming in buying 2, 3, 4 masks at a time at $20 a pop here. But my masks were so different. They were the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Queen, all the pop culture. Everything else out there was medical masks. And right, so people said, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to show my rock and roll. So it became the new T-shirt as far as I'm concerned. Well, what I've done, I'm Hindenburg. I'm now at 1114A Wellington Street, which is next door to the Fab Gear store. And the reason I've changed names, I've rebranded the store, is because I was planning on retiring. And in December, I go, oh, I'm not going to retire. But I've committed to changing what the store is about. So I came up with a new name, Fab Gear's Rock Shop, where legends are dressed. And essentially get that message out. I prefer, if the shirt don't fit, you come in, you try another one on. People like to feel the fabrics with clothing. It's amazing. You'll come in and go, oh, I love that. Oh, can I try this? So that's the big difference. I'm not out to make $1 gazillion. I stick the way I am, old school. I take cash, we take cards. Come on in and talk to the owner.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's hard to keep up with the changes. Ford government has had a change of heart. It is now offering 3 paid sick days. The legislation was just tabled. The government wanted unanimous consent. Let's just pass it. Let's just pass it right now. That's not going to happen. The opposition to Democrats and Liberals do want to have a look at the bill. So 3 paid sick days. It's not the 10 paid sick days. It has an expiry date of September 25th on it as well. Let's get some political reaction from Doris Grinspun, who is back, CEO, Registered Nurses Association of Ontario. Good morning and welcome back to the Rob Snow Show.
Thank you, Rob, for having us back. I was saying to your colleague that every time a nurse hears me in the radio, it energizes them to know someone is listening. So thank you for having us, because it's important for nurses to hear us in public, in the media. These 3 days, Rob, are quite frankly, at this late stage in the game, a joke. I'm sorry to say that. You know that when people are sick, they need way more than that. They don't stack on top of the feds, right? So basically, it's kind of a little bridge until they get the money from the feds. So is it better than nothing? Of course it's better than nothing. Should have happened 15 months ago. In fact, you know, before the Ford government came to be, we had the 3 days. Those are 3 days that were negotiated by many of us with Kathleen Wynne. So we had the 3 days. The government...
I believe it was 2 days. I think it was 2 days.
Right away.
Yeah.
But it's insufficient. It's insufficient in a time of crisis.
Why do you say that? It's insufficient. Why is it insufficient?
When a person is ill, or isolating, and the many that we are losing because of that. These are people, this is for people that don't have benefits, right? This is for people that already are in precarious employment. They do not have the time to fill in forms. It needs to be an employer program. It needs to be permanent. And when people are sick, I hope you, when you're sick, you are home and stay home and are not spreading, a virus. When I am sick, I stay home. Everybody else should have the right, a human right, that when you're sick, you stay home. And no one is going to take advantage. This thing of thinking that people just will take advantage is fantasy land, because if a workplace is a decent workplace, people go to work,
Yeah. Well, how will people know if it's fantasy land or not fantasy land, Doris? If you don't even need a doctor's note. You don't even need a doctor's note.
You are costing the system way more than the 10 sick days that we would give to people that are ill. And it's costing in lives. It's costing in nurses leaving the system because they cannot handle it anymore, the pressure that they're in. And it's costing people with cancer not having their surgeries because the system has canceled all their surgeries for not giving the 10 days sick time that people would have stayed at home in the first place and not harming their own family and spreading the virus.
How much of this, because certainly Doug Ford is in the middle of a firestorm here, unlike any other provincial premier, and there are only two other provinces that offer paid sick days.
But look at other countries. Look at California. Look at New York. 2 weeks, no questions asked. So, let's not look at the fact that in a country as rich as Canada,
right,
we act with universal health care, we say, but if you're sick, you need to go to work. You know what I mean? It makes no sense.
Well, I don't know. We can pick and choose and metrics. Do we want to compare Ontario to New York? Do we want to compare Ontario to California on any other kind of data set? And I don't know how we would stack up one against the other. But when it comes to paid sick days, my point is, how much of this blame really rests with Doug Ford, and how much of it is Mr. Trudeau's fault?
Well,
Mr. Trudeau came up with this program to his government's Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit. It's $500 a week for a 1 week period, and then if it lasts more than 1 week, and you want it to last more than 1 week because you're calling for 10 paid sick days, you need to apply again. And then it could last for a total of 4 weeks, but you need to keep applying.
I totally agree with you that it should have been made easier too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But more for a reason why we should get going here. The ones that have the problem is us. We have received money, so much money from the feds, rightfully so, because we needed that. The entire country needed that. Now is our time to put the money from our taxes to actually help the most vulnerable so they can protect their families, and also by doing that they protect the health system because the virus is not being spread. Let me also tell you that nurses that work as self-contractors, that work in several hospitals in the ICUs, and there are many of these nurses that work for agencies, they're not getting this money either because you need to be an employee, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is also an issue because as we speak, we have nurses leaving the system. It's much easier.
So you have, I'm sorry, Doris, just so I understand.
Or do contact and case tracing in a public health unit that working in an ICU.
I'm sorry, just so I understand and so my listeners understand, there are nurses who are working in our healthcare system who are basically...
With no benefits.
They're self-employed, like self-employed nurses? Is that what you're saying? Or
self-employed nurses that work in various hospitals when hospitals have a shortfall and they have expertise in ICU or expertise in emergency room, and then the hospital calls these agencies. Many of them are without benefits.
Okay. I want to ask you... What you want the Ford government to do with this program? I mean, it has a majority government at the Ontario legislature, as you know. You want it increased, right, to 10 days, and you want it made permanent. Those are the two big things.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely,
Yeah, okay.
because this is not only during a crisis. Now it's a disaster because the ICUs keep having more and more people, right?
Yeah.
But this is in general a problem. When people go to work sick, whether it's in the flu season or whether it's with other issues, it does not contribute to a healthy work environment, and it actually costs the system more at the end of the day. It costs people, it costs their families, right, the hardship of that, because they go to work sick, because otherwise they cannot put on minimum wage food on the table. And on top of that, it costs the health system, because if you let things linger, then there is complications, and it costs to the system way more. So we are paying the money anyways. We are just paying it in healthcare services, right?
Okay. We see these reports, healthcare workers from the Red Cross, healthcare workers from the Armed Forces, healthcare workers coming to Ontario from Newfoundland. There are also stories about nurses who are leaving the profession.
And there is also, and no one is mentioning that we brought, I was watching the National the other day when we were all clapping to the 9 people that came from Newfoundland, right?
Yeah.
3 dogs, 5 nurses, 5 RNs, and 1 NP. And I was clapping too because, beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I thought, who is clapping to the 400 nurses, RNs, that came back from their retirement as we speak, Rob? And we sent, RNAO sent to hospitals. No one is, not even in the media. Who is clapping to my colleagues, nurses, RNs, and NPs that are in the ICUs, seeing horror, Rob, seeing horror, entire families, okay? Who is clapping to them to say thank you that you're there? This is why they're leaving, Rob. They're not being valued and recognized, and they don't see the help coming in ways that are tangible and vocal. I just spoke with the minister office about that. I think this, why is it that in the first wave, Rob, in the first wave we gave $4 extra? I am not we are not the union, we're the policy arm. We deal with policy. But why is it that in the first wave and second wave we gave $4 per hour extra to all the workers?
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.